Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind. And now, the Freedom Reporters.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker with Maverick News, and I'm here with my co-host,
Brendan Kennedy, co-host for Maverick News. Hello and happy Monday, everybody.
And lots of stuff to share with you. I should also tell you that our live feed to Rumble tonight is not, I don't think it's working. And that's why we're not really directing people over there aggressively. It was working fine yesterday, but we're still running into a few bugs when we set that feed up. So until we get that working smoothly, we will not be promoting it extensively, but the account is there. We are on the platform. It just is not, it didn't take hold tonight as we established this feed, but we do have a lot to share with you, and we are still on YouTube and, on several channels across YouTube and across several locations on Facebook as well. And we have a substantial audience. In fact, Brendan, I was looking at the stats, and we have now enjoyed or been privileged to have over 2 million people download the show.
Wow. 2 million.
2 million. So
that's the size of like a European country.
Just about. Yes. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. What do we got? Trudeau and Boris Johnson, I guess, got together and had a few things to say about Ukraine today.
That is right. I have that pulled up and ready to roll whenever you want to, and
we'll come back to that maybe in a few minutes. We should also say that peace talks did take place today between the Russians and representatives from the Ukrainian government, and the way things were laid out there. Well, what the Russians are asking for is pretty much what we've been saying on this program since the beginning of the conflict, since the beginning of the invasion. And that's not exactly what we've been hearing from other mainstream media outlets that have chosen to completely ignore the issue of NATO expansion, which is foremost on Vladimir Putin's mind. And that's quite evident from the conditions he laid out to bring an immediate end to the hostilities. But we'll get into that tonight as well. Plus, if we have time, I'd like to get into why you need to be questioning everything and everyone, including and maybe even especially some of the news commentators and online political pundits that you normally trust. And I'll explain why. So, if you have favorite people that you go to on a regular basis to watch their shows, I've just noticed some unusual things taking place. Unusual things, maybe not unusual things, but aberrations in the political dividing lines, and it makes me question everything that I'm hearing and question why I'm hearing what I'm hearing. We can get into some of that. I'm talking about people like Dan Bongino, politicians like Ted Cruz, pundits like Mark Levin, and I can kind of outline some of that stuff. And these are guys that I normally listen to and I like a lot, but some of what they've been saying has made me kind of raise my eyebrows like Mr. Spock.
Yeah.
So anyway, what else do we have on the go? Oh, what's happening with the with Tamara Lich?
Oh,
Tamara Lich.
Yeah, Tamara Lich is out of jail, or scheduled to be out of jail any moment now. One of the two. We'll be getting into what are the conditions of her bail,
right?
Which is quite an extensive list of items that she has to abide by. And as we've seen already with her first bail trial, the judge that was with that should have recused herself. So Julie Bourgeois is a former Liberal candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada. And due to those political ties with Justin Trudeau, it is well believed that she should have recused herself. And I would put myself in that camp. Yes, they should have recused that. It should have never have happened. But we'll get into those conditions a little later in the show. So lots of stuff lined up. It's going to be great.
Yeah, and we'll have some footage from the People's Convoy. Lap number 2. They did another 2 laps around the Beltway today in Washington, D.C. So we're going to talk a bit about that. In fact, here, I'll just pull up a little bit of footage that we had from today before we go over and listen to what Justin Trudeau and Boris Johnson had to say. And here's a little bit of footage from the Beltway earlier today from the People's Convoy. So yesterday I was saying, Brendan, that I was wondering how much impact this was really going to have on the politicians. Like, how effective would this convoy be if all they're going to do is drive around but not really blockade anything, not actually go down into Washington, D.C. Right now, the strategy has been to be respectful, to remain completely lawful, to work with law enforcement, which is great, remain completely peaceful, which is perfect. But all they're doing is just like doing laps, kind of a slow roll of sorts, leaving an emergency lane open, leaving one lane open at all times so that traffic can still flow. But doing that, and at night they're staying over at the Hagerstown Speedway outside of the Washington area in a staging area. But how much leverage does that really give the truckers? They say they're going to stay there and continue to demonstrate until they get what they want. But is anyone really going to listen? Is it really going to make a difference? I don't know. It seems to me like they're, at this point, there really isn't much leverage there to bargain with. And if politicians and bureaucrats who want to keep the COVID pandemic mandates in place don't want to pay any attention to them, they kind of don't have to. Not only that, we're not really seeing much coverage, if any, from mainstream legacy media. They're kind of, I think, intentionally ignoring the protest out there. And all the coverage that we're getting is from independent journalism outlets like this one and many others, and live streamers who are on scene there. So that's how they're getting their voice out. That and just making a spectacle of themselves, I guess. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but I mean just making their presence known. When I say making a spectacle of themselves, that's maybe a poor choice of words, but making their presence known, being visible by driving around in a big convoy and snarling traffic a little bit, causing a little bit of traffic disruption. But other than that,
You're right. How effective is this? I would wager that most people who live in Washington, D.C. are probably the political elite and not so much people who work there. It's probably just like Ottawa in that sense, where the political elite and that sort of thing live in the area of the Capitol building and that sort of situation. And then people who work in restaurants and that sort of thing probably come in from suburbs and subdivisions from the outskirts of it, is, I would say, would be a fair assessment. So this is not probably going to piss off any politicians. It's probably not going to have that type of teeth. And with this, I find even right-leaning news organizations like the Daily Wire, run by Ben Shapiro, his pundits that work there, especially Matt Walsh, are saying, I don't get the point of this. Doesn't understand the point of it. So I don't think that this is going to have as much teeth as would need be to be taken serious.
Well, one of my main contacts down there did message me, and he said, other things are not off the table, and I don't want to get into what those other things might be. The question is, will they do those things if they need to, if they're not, if no one is paying attention to them? I'm fairly certain that they're looking at doing more if they need to. They just don't want to because they don't want this to turn into a repeat of Ottawa, where you have all these cops turned into a paramilitary force come in and start to bust skulls, right? You don't want, they don't want a January 6th 2.0, right? They don't want that. They're afraid that if they do anything, like even one wrong thing, that they'll be smeared, and they know that certain politicians and certain political groups are looking for any opportunity to discredit them. So they're afraid of that. They're afraid of the media also smearing and discrediting them, and I totally understand that. So right now they are trying this approach. But will this be effective? I don't know. It's like I said yesterday. I think you have to look at this kind of thing sort of like a labor dispute in a way. And if you're in a strike and you're part of a labor union, you picket outside the factory and shut it down, and then prevent replacement workers from coming in. So if all you did, if you went on strike, was, I don't know, drive around on the street out in front of the factory, but don't do anything to prevent replacement workers from coming in. If you don't really shut the factory down, how much leverage do you have? You don't have any. That's why companies bring in, scab labor or replacement labor, because they want to. They try to take that leverage away from striking employees, right? Striking workers. So I look at it kind of like that. Where's the leverage? I don't see very much here. I see that you might as well at this point go camping at the KOA campground. The only thing that they have going for them is getting the message out and having politicians understand that they're trying to be diplomatic and this thing could get a lot worse, and they are there in large numbers, so maybe they should pay attention. Problem is, up until now, I don't think the politicians have really, on the one side, probably don't care that much, if at all, and they just want them all to go home and they want to ignore them. On the other side, I mean, in the United States, I think they do have some politicians who are more open to listening and maybe coming on side with them. There are politicians down there saying that. In Canada, no politicians are in power that would come to the truckers' aid at all. So that's the problem that they had in Canada. I don't think there was a single politician in power other than a couple who have been expelled from their parties who went down to lend support to the truckers at all, either because they're afraid to or they just don't agree.
I would say that certain politicians provided a lukewarm endorsement. Lukewarm would be the key word I'm using there, where they would go out and engage with them a little bit, and they would talk to some of them, like even Aaron O'Toole, who got kicked out by his party as the leader. He's still with the party. You see that situation where he even went and talked to some people. Some of them treated it like a bit like a what's the word I would use? Like a photo opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they used like a.
Yeah, Pierre Poilievre went down to an overpass at one point, stood there with some people and made a video, and sort of it seemed like he was supporting the truckers. But then on the flip side of that, I then heard him say that he wasn't supporting any of the blockades, if you want to call them that, at the border crossings, because that was a violation of other people's rights. So he was a little bit wishy-washy, honestly, when it came to supporting the truckers.
Politically correct would be the word I would say.
Wishy-washy is still my words.
Yeah, Yeah, I listened to a speech he delivered in Saskatchewan on the weekend, Friday night, I think.
Yes.
Andrew Scheer had endorsed him, and he had discussed a number of things. And um, one of the great things was he's all in on endorsing freedoms. But at this point, I don't have an endorsement for any of the mainstream politicians at this point, because I quite frankly, after the disastrous election we just had, where we had no opposition whatsoever,
Yeah.
um, I don't believe them. I don't
Yeah.
believe them. I don't believe them at all. I don't have any hope for it. Like I would jump more on that bandwagon if Pierre Poilievre gave a conversation around the flip-flops that the Conservative Party of Canada did in the last election that were so bad. Like flip-flopping on carbon tax, defunding the CBC. They created an even worse carbon plan than the Liberal Party has, where the Liberal Party at least gives you some money with your tax return and says you can spend that on whatever you want. But the Conservative Party was like, oh, our carbon tax will be, we're going to take your money and then you can only buy things that we say you can buy with it, which was god awful. So, yeah, they have a lot of repairing to do, and they have some accountability that they need to take on how badly they fumbled things. But that's the thing. You're not going to see that because you're not going to see anybody go out there and step on O'Toole's toes for the mistakes that he made. But I think that those things need to be talked about before Canadian citizens can have any type of trust with them, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I don't trust the Conservative Party at this point, not at all. So, why would I? And I even with Pierre Poilievre, I like a lot of what he says, but like I said, on a few things he seems pretty wishy-washy, and where's he been for the last 2 years?
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. So, who's to say that if he became prime minister, he wouldn't do exactly the same thing to us again? I'm looking for some sort of assurance from the guy before I can throw my
and
my
that
support
would
behind him.
that would not happen until you see some kind of accountability or open discussion by the party. But they're not going to do that because it would look terrible as optics with the party. It would probably create inter-party fighting as well.
And we should point out for people tuning in from the United States or other countries around the world that Pierre Poilievre is a politician for the Canadian Progressive Conservative Party federally, and he is probably the front runner to become the new leader of the party. The leader of the party, Aaron O'Toole, was removed essentially by the members of the party when the truckers rolled into Ottawa, and I think the truckers demonstration had something to do with that. Now, Brendan, I did receive a phone call from someone who's pretty heavily involved with the Conservative Party federally, and he said that his view on all of this is he's concerned about the splintering of the conservative end of conservatives, and he said that we should talk about telling conservatives or people who want to affect change within the Conservative Party, people who are maybe part of the People's Party of Canada now, specifically.
Yeah.
Which is run by another politician, Maxime Bernier, again, for people outside of Canada, who used to be part of the federal Conservative Party. Now he has his own party, the PPC, or the People's Party of Canada. But this person, I won't tell you his name, but he's heavily involved with the Conservative Party, and he's of the opinion that in order for real change to take effect within the Conservative Party, more people need to become members of the party so that they can vote in the leadership race, which will be coming up. And they have until I think it's June 3rd to register or get a membership within the Conservative Party. And that can be a very effective thing as well. If you want to affect change, there are a number of ways you might be able to do that. You can do it by joining a party like the People's Party of Canada, if that platform conforms with your particular points of view, or you join a party like the Conservative Party of Canada, and maybe they don't, their platform might not be everything you want, but if you become part of it, you then get to vote for the leader that you think would best serve your interests and reflect and would fight for your values and views. And also you can try to push for platform change from within. The point being, if a lot of people who left the party because they were not happy with the previous leaders, Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole, if those people came back in large enough numbers, they might be able to bring that party back over to the Conservative side and away from these liberal values that seem to have consumed the party. It's become much more progressive and far less conservative. And they've been known as the progressive conservatives, right? So today I think it's far more progressive than it is conservative.
Yes. So two things there, I would say. Number one, I agree with as much political involvement for everybody as possible. Sure. And there's nothing stopping you from holding a Conservative Party membership and a PPC membership or any other memberships for that matter. Be as politically involved as you want. Somebody else pointed out here that Pierre is also listed on the World Economic Forum, and that is something I believe he needs to take account for too, and discuss that in order to have any type of success. But number two, Randy Hillier touched on something.
And explain who Randy Hillier is.
He is the MPP for
Frontenac, Lanark, Kingston, which is a provincial riding. He's a provincial politician in Ontario.
Yeah. He touched on something, and we did air his statement that he's not going to run in politics anymore. But he said, we have politicians without backbones who are essentially running surveys on everything. They're feeling for things that are happening in the political spectrum and running with them. That's a big problem. And how can you trust any politician that isn't going with what he believes? He's going with what he believes is the Canadian population is possibly speculating on. It doesn't make for good leadership. And that's why Aaron O'Toole was a flip-flopper. He went based off of surveys. He didn't go based off of his gut instincts. But I don't know. Until such time, there's very little you could do with a political party membership other than vote on candidates as it comes. You could decide who's going to run in certain elections. You could decide on leadership.
That's not really true. If you're a member of a party, then it's actually, you can become even more involved if you want to. And if people become active within a party or a riding association, then you can get involved in a campaign. You can become a campaign manager. It's a lot of these positions too. These riding associations have difficulty filling because there's work involved. But if you really want to affect change in whatever party you want to join, it's not really that difficult to get involved in and have an impact. Just by getting involved, then you can make your voice heard. You can have influence within the party itself, and you can go to their policy conventions, the party conventions, and you can stand up and speak and offer your piece of mind on particular issues and bring issues forward and get people to look at them. And It's actually at the party level, you can affect quite a bit of change as an individual. So that is a very good place to get involved and try to make a difference.
I don't know. I've been a card carrying. I was a card carrying conservative member for many years, and volunteered for multiple elections with no feedback whatsoever. So
But
I
did
mean,
you ever go to a did you ever go to a convention?
never gone to a convention.
I mean, that's what you got to do. You got to get involved and you got to make
Yeah,
contacts and, you know, and get involved and talk to the people who are sort of like the power players and get involved in that sort of inner circle of people. Anybody can do that. It, but it's up to you. It's like you get out of it what you put into it.
yeah,
But if you just leave it up to other people, then you don't you don't get much of a say, right? Now, sometimes the structure of things makes it maybe a little difficult to exert your influence, but
that's just it, right?
really, I mean, Brendan, you know, like from you and I have worked on some things together, and uh, it's hard to find competent people to fill positions within a lot of these riding associations, and then as you climb up the ladder too, because a lot of people, a lot of these are volunteer positions, so a lot of people just don't want to do the work and do it for free.
Yeah,
But if you care enough about an issue or issues and you get involved, then you can make a difference.
yeah.
And and,
I'm
and
all
that's
for I'm all for getting your foot in the door as hard as possible. Like go for it and do it. But what most people actually do when they get a membership is they don't do anything.
that's right, but that's up to them.
Yeah.
But the opportunity is there, and all you have to do is get a membership in any party you want, and you can get involved. And the more involved you get, the louder your voice becomes and the more influence you have. It's really that simple. The harder you work, the more involved you get, the more influence you have. And you could in within a party, it's not difficult to climb the ladder. You could become a candidate yourself. There's all kinds of things you could do. And that's right. Lee Herring says it's all about networking, and that's exactly right. And the next thing you know, you're standing beside the leader of the party, or maybe you're the leader of the party yourself. You can take it as far as you think you might want to go. And then the only thing holding you back is your talents, your knowledge, your level of commitment, and how much work you put into things. Whatever party you choose, you have to vote that way down the line, mayor, sheriff, etc., says Sonia. Well, not yes, and no. At the when you're at the when you become a card carrying member of a party, the point is if you go to a convention, especially when they're deciding what the platform is going to be, and all these parties have conventions to revise their platforms at certain periods of time. And when you go to those conventions, you can get involved in committees and then you can put forward particular issues and push for the party to adopt certain positions on issues as part of their party platforms. And then those things get voted on at those conventions. And then, yes, afterward, sometimes people have to fall in line, and the MPs are sometimes whipped to vote in a particular way. But you can affect change at the level. It starts with those conventions where parties set out their platforms, what they're going to carry into an election, what are they going to run on, what are the key issues, and what are their positions on key issues going to be. And sometimes they can change. Their positions can change at those policy conventions, and it's the grassroots membership that can make the difference in that regard. And if you support a particular person for the leadership, you can influence that person. You see, that's how it's at that level that the platform changes, and you can have a major impact that way. You really can, even as an individual, more influence than you might imagine. The parties are failing because they're never being challenged, says Julie. Putin is the only leader at war with WEF. Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know. I would challenge, like I've mentioned it on the show before. In 2021, he participated in the World Economic Forum. And he was on their website until all this stuff started happening, and then they took him off. So that's questionable at best.
I don't think so. Putin is not part of the. He's an outsider, Brendan. He's not. This is my opinion. Okay, he's not. He's not supporting what they're doing. They don't like him. He's on the outside. This is not some weird, double negative conspiracy theory where he's actually on side with the globalists but it looks like he isn't, and that's just too whacked out. They don't like the guy. In fact, it's worse than what our media and our politicians have been telling us, and we can get into this more later. But the reason it's worse is because our politicians, our governments, they're not being transparent or open or honest with the public. And that's why we need to get into why everyone needs to start questioning everything they're hearing, even from news commentators and pundits that they normally would trust and have come to trust. Big voices, especially on the conservative side, where a lot of these people they're rattling their sabers. And we can get into this more, but as the broadcast goes on, but everything I've laid out over the last number of nights with regard to what Russia needs or wants in order to bring peace to Ukraine, in order for the hostilities to stop there, it really has everything to do with NATO expansion. But they're not talking about that in the mainstream media. And even people that I normally listen to and like, a lot of them just have not even been talking about that. And it goes beyond that. And the question is why? Why aren't they talking about that? And I would put it to you that Vladimir Putin feels threatened because he is an outsider. He's not part of the World Economic Forum. He's not part of their global plan. He is, in fact, and Russia has been the country that has been on the outside for a long time, a long, long time. And so these globalists have their eyes on Russia. They have their sights set on Russia more than anyone is letting on. And he knows it. And that's why we're getting what we're getting from the media. People need to wake up and understand this. We're still not getting the full picture here. And I will address this more later because we have other things to show you right now, but we can talk about it more later.
Roger that.
So what else do we have here? We've got Trudeau and Boris Johnson addressing Ukraine today because there were peace talks today. And let's get into that right now. What are those conditions? Putin outlined, I think it was 4 conditions in order for hostilities to end immediately. Pretty simple stuff, really. Russia says military action can stop immediately, but they have 4 conditions. And the 4 conditions are, and this comes from Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, after 12 days of fighting, and the 4 conditions are, Ukraine must cease military action. Second condition, change its constitution to enshrine neutrality. That is what I have been talking about since we first started talking about this on these broadcasts.
Yeah. He hit the nail on the head, right? So
that's right. Russia wants Ukraine to be a neutral country. In other words, a buffer country a buffer against NATO expansion. Because as I explained earlier in previous episodes, when the Berlin Wall came down and Ronald Reagan, who was president at the time, stood there and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Gorbachev agreed to do that. And because NATO at the time promised they would not expand even 1 inch further to the east toward Russia. But they have. And with each step toward the east, it makes the Russian government that much more nervous. And that just is, it's been continuing. And so now you have even countries like Hungary, Poland, part of NATO. And he doesn't want NATO on his doorstep with weapons. It's no different than what we saw. It would be no different than a hostile country like Russia parking missiles along the Canada-U.S. border and pointing them into the United States. Or China parking missiles and weapon systems along the Mexican U.S. border and pointing them at the States. It's the same darn thing.
And we've also pointed out the very fact that NATO was contrived to fight a Cold War against Russia. So it's like, why would Russia not feel intimidated by NATO? So it's one of those things, it's like, that's the whole point of NATO's existence, was to keep the West safe from the USSR after World War II. That's the whole point of it. What is it? What's their objective now? Their objective now is to, well, still keep the West safe, but
I think it's worse than that, Brendan. I'll come back to it in a moment. But let's let the people know what the other two conditions are maybe here, which to bring hostilities to an end. The third condition is acknowledge Crimea as Russian territory, which, again, I mean, that all plays into the same aspects of the issue that we were just discussing. NATO, the United States, they dispute Russia's annexation of Crimea. But the reality is they have annexed it, and that's the way it is. Yeah. And the fourth condition is recognize the separatist republics of Donetsk and Lugansk as independent territories. And there again, if you listen to the rhetoric coming from our governments, our politicians, it's their position that when I listen to them, it's like Putin has taken over those areas in the Donbass. The reality is those two areas declared independence from Ukraine. And when they did that, a civil war essentially broke out. But it wasn't it was more of a one-sided civil war where Ukraine has been bombing, shelling those areas for the past about 8 years or so. And
also built a dam to block off all their water.
Yeah, and they've killed 14,000 people. So those areas which declared independence from Ukraine went to Russia and they said, if will you protect us? And if you do, will you recognize our independence? And Putin said, yes. So he agreed to protect them and sent in what he calls peacekeepers, but his military soldiers, to protect the people in those separatist areas, and doesn't want to occupy those regions. He's just agreed to protect the people. And when he moved in, Ukraine continued to bomb the people in Donetsk and Lugansk. Needless to say, that has contributed to the hostilities there. So that part of the issue has really not been clearly laid out by the legacy or mainstream media in the West, and I think it needs to be.
That's not going to happen though, because they are just totally ignoring what these wants are. They're saying, "Oh, well, unprovoked attack, unprovoked attack, unprovoked attack." It's just like the trucker convoy, where I can't believe it. It's like you can't say Ukraine or you can't say Russia without them saying illegal, unprovoked attack. Every time they mention those words, it's always illegal, unprovoked attack. It's like, give me a break. If you say it enough times, you brainwash people. Is that like what they're doing with it? It just drives me nuts.
See, when I hear that over and over again, it to me, it is like cheerleading. It is propaganda. It is no different than saying that the truckers' protest in Ottawa was an occupation. That's a key word they keep using every time they talk about the truckers'
illegal operation.
It's the so-called Freedom Convoy to discredit it. And in Ukraine now, it's an illegal invasion, right? Unprovoked aggression, Russian aggression, Russian aggression, aggression, Russian aggression, over and over again. Russia aggression, Russian aggression. It starts to drive you a little crazy after a while. Here's the truth. NATO has continued to expand east since the 80s, through the 90s. They said they wouldn't, and they kept going. For Vladimir Putin, I can understand why he sees that as an existential threat to his country. And based on the behavior that we've seen from NATO, World Economic Forum, the United States government, which is basically being run by the same political forces, I think, that are involved with the WEF today, and what we see coming from our Prime Minister in Canada. If you don't think that NATO would like to affect regime change in Russia, think again. If you don't think that I think in their arrogance, they've pushed all the way to Ukraine, and they are being aggressive with their expansion to the point where they've taken us to the brink of a possible nuclear conflict. What they've done has been irresponsible, and it has been aggressive. And I don't think that it's unreasonable at all of Vladimir Putin to view it as such. Now, I'm not a big fan of Vladimir Putin. I think that he's a dictator. I know that he can be and has, he's had people killed. He's killed journalists. I think that's a terrible thing. But here's the reality on the world stage. And here's the reality within Russia. And this is a reality that he has to deal with. And I'm not making excuses, but you have to look at it from this perspective as well. When you're the leader of Russia, the rule of law that we have in Canada doesn't apply. The rule of law that you have in the United States doesn't apply. I've said before, I think these world leaders are really kind of like a bunch of gangsters. And when you have political opponents in the international arena, or you're the leader of Russia, and you have political opponents who are challenging you, the rules of the game are a lot different there than they are in, say, Canada or the United States or in England. And some of these guys would just as easily kill Vladimir Putin and have him assassinated as he would have them killed because he sees them as a threat. And if you think that's far-fetched, and if you think that those kinds of rules don't apply, just listen to what Lindsey Graham said this week. Senator Lindsey Graham put out a call for someone to assassinate Vladimir Putin. And I said I thought that was irresponsible. The reason I think it's irresponsible is because it's inflammatory at a time when cooler heads need to prevail, when we need to start talking to prevent a possible nuclear conflict. Instead, that guy goes out and throws a bunch of very expensive gasoline on a fire, potentially, and then also said something really stupid, which was that he thought Vladimir Putin was ready to launch a limited nuclear strike to level a Ukrainian city to demoralize the people to bring a quicker end to the conflict. Again, he doesn't know that. That's just inflammatory talk, and that's more saber-rattling. He's just trying to put more leverage behind the neocons who want to go to war. That's why we need to start questioning everything we're hearing from people that we might even normally trust, including a lot of the pundits that are on the radio or online. Because I'm hearing a lot of rhetoric from people that I normally like. But when I'm hearing people like Dan Bongino, who I have a lot of respect for and I really, really like, but he hasn't been talking about the NATO issue. For him, it's just about, when I've been listening to him, and maybe we can find a clip at some point through the broadcast. This kind of came to me just before we came on the air tonight.
Yeah.
But he's kind of like, seems to be trying to feel his way through the issue. It's certainly, in some of the broadcasts I heard during the early portions of the invasion. And I think in his effort to be patriotic and pro-America, he's trying to find a balance somewhere, and without a willingness, or maybe not even enough knowledge to acknowledge the NATO issue. So he doesn't talk about that. For him, it's all about, and even with Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, it's all about Putin is a monster, Putin is evil, Putin just wants to restore the old Soviet Union and wants to expand. And so we have to stop him at any cost. And that's why we need NATO, and that's why we need to take a stand in Ukraine. But there's never any talk about all this NATO expansion that's been taking place over time, shifting further and further and further east, closer and closer to the Russian border, and more bringing NATO weaponry closer and closer to the Russian border. They don't talk about that issue. And that is, for Putin, the core issue. As we just laid out for you in the demands that he has just put forward, this is not a new thing. It's not a new thing. These demands, and here, let's bring them up. I've got an article here from Yahoo News. He's been saying this for 8 years plus. At least 8 years, probably longer. Right here. Cease military action. Wants Ukraine to change its constitution to enshrine neutrality. That is the key issue, and that's all about NATO expansion. He does not want and cannot afford to have Ukraine become a member of NATO. If Ukraine becomes a NATO country, and they put weapons, missiles, other weapons into Ukraine, it's right on his doorstep. And he sees that, and I think rightly so, as an existential threat to the country. I can understand that. And Brendan, I'm going to suggest to you that I think NATO would like to go into Russia if they could find a way, and they would like to remove Vladimir Putin. And if that's not the case, then why do we hear Lindsey Graham saying that he'd like to have the guy assassinated? Because he would like to have Vladimir Putin assassinated. He would like regime change there. And that's because NATO the World Economic Forum. They have their sights set on a global government. And Russia is the main country that is standing in their way. Canada has just fallen with almost no resistance. Canada's gone. Canada's gone. We're now under that umbrella.
Yeah.
We are the world's first post-nation state. The other crown and the jewel, the United States, and they're not far behind. They're just about there. If not there already, they're very, very close.
Well, definitely President Joe Biden is asleep at the helm, right? So nothing really more you could say about that.
So I'm sorry. I know that might not be a popular thing to say. And maybe some people are going to accuse me of being a Russian stooge or something. I can assure you, I don't. I don't want to live in Russia. I don't like the Russian system of government. I believe in freedom. That's what I'm fighting for. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom. Okay. I believe in freedom. I don't believe in Russia, but I understand the issue, I think. And I know that Putin has killed journalists. I find that disgusting. I don't like to see Tamara Lich. I didn't like to see her held in prison as a political prisoner. I don't like that stuff. Okay?
No, we don't like it at all. And I mean, for the most part, we're anti-war.
Jeremy Elgin says Canada is not gone. Yeah, it is. It's freaking gone. It is so gone, man. It's like you can't, it's not even, you might as well call it something else. I don't even know why we bother to fly the Canadian flag anymore, because they flew it at half staff for, I don't know, months. And Canada is gone, Jeremy. It's freaking gone. I don't know how we're going to get it back, but it's gone. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is gone. They can do an end run around it anytime they want. It's a failed document. Until they find a way to revive that, restore it, and take out that notwithstanding clause, our government can just declare another emergency and take all your rights away at will. The only rights you have right now are the rights that Justin Trudeau and the government decide to give you. That's it. And because we're in that state, Canada is gone. We're not a free country anymore. And if you're not vaccinated, you're a prisoner in your own country. You can't even leave. You can't get on a plane to fly because these mandates are still in place. So your freedom of mobility is restricted, if not taken away completely. Canada is gone. That's why we're here. That's why we're fighting this information war. That's why we're pointing out this information even about Russia tonight. People need to freaking wake up. Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. Our government has lied to us over and over and over and over again about all of these conflicts. They've lied to us about what over the last 2 years? Everything. Lie after lie after lie. We keep sending our young people overseas to fight, spill their blood, and die. And for what? Lies. A lot of lies in senseless wars. And for what? What did they die for in Afghanistan? To have Joe Biden turn around and exit the way that he did? Did we solve anything over there? No. They were arming. They wound up arming the people we were fighting against. Look at what happened in Syria. Same damn thing. Under the table, behind the scenes, they're arming terrorists. Western governments are arming terrorists so they can go into Syria and cause havoc, and then fighting them on the other side of the border in another country. Canada's freaking gone. It's been, the truckers' blockade, that was the final stand. It wasn't even a blockade in Ottawa. It was a demonstration. And we're going to get into Tamara Lich's release on bail. And when we talk about what the judge today had to say, it demonstrates that Canada is lost. There's still remnants of the rule of law in play, and that sort of saved her a little bit today. But the fact that she spent as much time in jail as she had is completely unjustified. and not representative of what a free and open society and a democracy should be. She's charged with counseling to commit mischief. The prosecution's calling for 10 years. The reality is, when all is said and done, she'll probably end up with time served. But the government is so corrupt and so authoritarian that what they're really using is lawfare to go after her and the other truckers. It's not about getting a conviction. It's about making her life a living hell by making her go through the process, and by laying charges and calling for penalties so severe that it takes a long time for her to get out of jail, and a long time and a lot of money for her to fight the battle, which ultimately ends up in minimal, if any, sentence at the end. But that's not the sentence at the end is not the punishment. It's the process that's the punishment. It's designed to crush her and crush other truckers and other political opponents with lawfare, because the government is corrupt. Canada's freaking gone. Brendan, Joe is always asleep.
Oh, yes. Well aware.
And yeah, we are fighting this information war. If you can support us, please go to freedomreporters.com. We can't do it alone. We do need your help. We need your support. And we've had amazing support from a lot of people over the last couple of months, and we're greatly appreciative, and it is making a difference. And that's why we're expanding out. We're moving over to Rumble and other platforms and expanding our coverage. And we've been on here like 3 hours a night, every night, and we'll continue to be here bringing you other perspectives. And honestly, I feel like I've got I know I've painted a big target on myself, and I think, Brendan, you probably feel the same way, because we are being attacked.
Yeah, I spent over an hour on the phone today with a relative of mine who sees complete opposite of what I see. Their only mistake being they took me for a chump, so they didn't quite anticipate the depth of knowledge that we hold and that sort of thing. So there's an information war out there, and there's some people who are only subscribed to the other side. And just remember, when you donate to freedomreporters.com, a communist cries. So please continue to support us. You can also support us by giving this video a thumbs up and hitting the subscribe button and the bell for notification. I absolutely love all the help and support that we have received. And just to give you a glimpse of what the info war looks like, this is what it looks like, because people are posting this crap on social media. And anybody who has been following our show knows that this is not true. Notice how Ukrainian patriots are defending their capital instead of attacking it. Well, we know that's not true. There's gangs of hooligans running amok in the streets with government-issued weapons, looting and robbing. This is not true. So this is what we're up against. People actually believe this stuff. They actually believe that Ukraine is some white knight defending democracy in the far east of Europe's armpit. It's just not true.
Look, I mean, the people of Ukraine, it would be great if they were able to determine their own political destiny, right? That would be a fantastic thing. Elect their own government without outside interference, choose who leads their country, what kind of government they have, and if they had a true democracy, that would be a great thing. But the reality is, the government in Ukraine is, it was installed after a CIA coup, and Zelensky is a Western puppet. Before that, it was a government that was controlled by Russia, essentially. Not entirely, but not entirely neutral either. So, but certainly Zelensky is a puppet of the West, and that's why they've been westernizing the country. That's why NATO has been able to push toward making Ukraine a member country of NATO. And that's why Putin is so concerned. It's not truly a democracy. And that's why Zelensky imprisoned his political opponents. And so this assertion that Ukrainian patriots are defending their capital instead of attacking it, this is like, this is even less about Ukraine. This is about the truckers and about the January 6ers. That's what this is about. To smear those people and make them look like they're not patriotic. So, again, you know, I think you take some of this stuff with a few grains of salt.
Oh yeah, well we all gotta take it with a few grains of salt, right? Like that's exactly why we're here. So we can't. We can't
And
believe.
here, you know what? I'd like to talk about this propaganda that I see it on Facebook. Let's take a look at the other 98%. Honestly, they drive me crazy.
Yeah.
But this is what we've got going on, okay? So this is a Facebook page, well funded. This is a but when I see the propaganda that these guys post, it gives me insight into where we're really at with these issues. And in a reverse way, I find the transparency that is not really being offered or is not apparent when it's just played out in the mainstream media. So this is the first post that popped up when I called it here. Dear Trucker Convoy, nobody cares. George Takei, Star Trek guy, right?
Yep.
Sulu from Star Trek. So, okay, they don't like the convoy. Nobody cares. I care. George Takei cares too. Cared enough to post that. The other 98% cared. Pretty excited. Our loan was approved. We're closing on a full tank of gas this weekend. Ha ha ha. Okay, that's not really that political.
It kind of is weird that was posted on there, seeing as they love high fuel prices. And...
Yes, and there are other posts too, Brendan, that about fuel on here that I noticed today that I think are quite telling, and I'm sure we're going to come across those in a moment.
Yeah, that's weird.
Putin's war extends beyond the bombs and tanks into the living room of everyday Russians. Russia's disinformation machine runs so deep, some don't know war is happening. Okay, I don't know about that because I'm not in Russia. First foreigners have already joined International Legion, Ukraine's volunteer military force, and are fighting outside of Kiev. According to the Ukrainian ground forces, the volunteers came from the US, UK, Sweden, Lithuania, Mexico, and India. And I know that some everyday Canadians are on their way, if they're not there already, to fight as well.
Gung-ho.
But that's more propaganda. And if you're not trained and they put a gun in your hand, you're probably just going over there to get killed.
Human shield.
And it's amazing. Like, these guys were only ever posting about COVID and the pandemic for a long time. Now they're only posting about the war in Ukraine. And they put a lot of money behind these posts. They do to distribute them. Can't believe this has to be said. If you're defending or downplaying the actions of Vladimir Putin, you have chosen the wrong side of history. That's Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah, because they know about the wrong side of history, right?
Let's see. Oh, here's one. Since the Russian invasion, the cost to produce wind energy has gone up $0. So you see, don't ever let a crisis go to waste. What they're doing here is as I said yesterday, these people on that side of the political spectrum, the radical left, or I would say the fascio communists, they want gasoline at over $2 a liter or $8 a gallon. They want it. They don't want you to drive. They want you to have less. They want everything expensive so you consume less, so you have a smaller footprint on the planet. They don't care about people. They don't want you to have a large family. They don't want you to have a family at all. They don't want you to have kids. They don't want you to reproduce. They don't want you to have very much of anything. They want you to own nothing and be happy. I'm not even sure they want you to be happy, but they don't want you to have much because their kind of world is very gray and glum.
I'm so sorry. Just the way you said that. I'm not even sure they want you to be happy.
I'm pretty sure they don't.
I'm pretty sure they don't want you to be happy.
Have you ever met a happy fascio-communist? They're always angry. They hate everything. If they're not screaming at the top of their lungs in somebody's face, they're throwing a temper tantrum. They're not happy people. They're just not happy people. The largest oil and gas companies made nearly $200 billion in profits last year. There are zero reasons for regular folks to be paying a premium at the pumps while big oil feels no hit. Don't be fooled into thinking higher gas prices equal Ukrainian solidarity. This is corporate greed and price gouging. So,
whoa, somebody doesn't know about economics there.
At all.
That is ignorance.
And this is what I wanted to talk about this tonight because this is complete propaganda. This is complete total misinformation. This is aimed at people who are not educated in economics, who don't really understand how commodities work. They certainly don't understand the oil market or the environment or many of the other issues surrounding this, and they don't understand what this war is all about. If you buy into this, you're just letting them pull the wool over your eyes. The reality is, I agree that there's no reason we should be paying these kinds of prices. But it's not corporate greed. It's a government agenda. I think the government is doing this on purpose. I think the government has had their sights set on gasoline at $2 plus a liter for quite some time. At $8 a gallon and $6 a gallon here and whatever it is, okay? These crazy gas prices.
Especially politicians that have endorsed climate carbon tax type initiatives, because the sole purpose of the carbon tax is to make you to think before going out for a Sunday drive. Make you think before you turn the heat on. It's absolutely ridiculous. It makes no sense. It only hurts the middle class. It only hurts the lower middle class. And that's what they've done with these policies. And all of these champagne socialists go, "Oh, that's great. We could save the planet because blue collar Bill doesn't get to drive his truck this day." I mean, you've said it before, Rick Walker, but I think it's entirely plausible that they don't want anybody driving anymore.
Yeah, well, I need to kind of explain my point too, so people fully understand what I'm saying. I do agree that we should not be paying these prices even now. I think that the reason we're paying is not just because they've decided to stop importing oil from Russia. The reason we're paying is because they are refusing or they won't increase production here. Fine, if you're gonna stop importing oil from Russia, then you increase the production here. And we have the oil, we have the resources. We never should have dialed back on the production of oil here to begin with. They shouldn't have dialed back on the production of oil and natural gas in the United States. They were energy independent, net energy independent under Trump. Now, they're a net energy importer again, and they're vulnerable. Now they're talking about ramping up production, but are they really going to do it? I don't think they will, not to the degree where it's going to provide the kind of relief that people really deserve at the pumps. And that's not corporate greed. No doubt these oil companies are cashing in, but that's only because the commodity prices are increasing. So the money they get per barrel of oil, the money they get at the pumps when you gas up, it is more. But that's because there's less supply. So there's less on the market, the price goes up across, all over the world. But here, also in Canada, we've got these carbon taxes, and there's another hit on the carbon tax coming April 1st. And I don't see the government saying, "Whoa, let's hold on this. We've got these crazy gas prices now. We better not increase them anymore with an additional hikes on the carbon tax." That would just be too hard on the middle class or working class people or just Canadians in general. No talk about that. No, just go ahead, keep on slapping the taxes on. We're at $2.19 in Montreal. Let's see if we can get her up to $2.50 a liter.
It's worth noting that Jason Kennedy, and the premier for Alberta, or if you are American or whatever, would be kind of like the governor of Alberta, is not following through with that to provide relief at the pumps. I thought that was worthy of noting. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just this is a very simplistic thing. Blame it all on the corporations. It's not the oil companies. The oil companies want to pump the oil out. They want to get that oil out of the ground, and they want to sell it. You approve the contracts, approve the drilling permits, and they'll go get the oil. It's just that simple. But if you're Joe Biden and you're canceling the permits and you don't allow the companies to go extract the oil, then the guys working in the oil fields, they get laid off. You lose jobs. You don't have the domestic energy. You have to import it. So where does it come from? Overseas. And if there's less on the market, the price goes up. It's just that simple. It's supply and demand. And they're trying to force people to buy electric vehicles. That is not being driven by the market. That's being driven by government penalties and government incentives. They don't like oil. Now, we can talk a lot about why, but
yeah, let's keep
they don't like oil.
No.
What other crap are we hearing? Oh, there's more. BP profits soared 13 billion. See, it's all about, this is like, don't blame the government, just blame the oil companies. The oil companies didn't go to war in Ukraine. The oil companies didn't cancel the drilling contracts. This is government policy. The government has decided that they're not going to increase production. And there's more. Just see, that's the thing. This is propaganda. This is propaganda. And this is designed to shield the government from public criticism. Thousands of refugees evac Kharkiv by train as Russian bombs pummel the city.
Yeah,
I don't know. Is that real? It's probably. I don't even know that's real.
If there's bombs going off around me, that's where I would stand, like right close into a place where I can't move, or just.
I don't know. I don't trust anything from these guys.
No.
They're terrible. Anyway, if you see stuff coming from these guys, oh, here's another one. You bought that gas guzzling truck. Go ahead and whine about gas prices. Ha ha ha. I swear I'm listening.
Gee.
Well, what's that? That's like, don't like Trump people, don't like redneck truckers, right?
It's like, how dare you? I don't know, like, what a bunch of clowns, if you ask me. There's all kinds of groups like this that exist and are solely designed on making leftist ideological propaganda, just like you see here. I think it's worthy of noting that at least with the freedom movement that I've seen in Canada, it seems largely to be grassroots. And when things are grassroots and more heartfelt, they're more effective. This just looks like corporate garbage to me. Somebody sat around and it's like, how how do I make a point about this? It's like, oh, gee, you bought your gas guzzling truck and now it's your fault.
You want to know what the deep state is? You're looking at it right here. The deep state is the WEF. The deep state is the politicians that are supporting that globalist agenda. And this is the propaganda arm of the deep state. This is a very, very, very well-funded propaganda organization. They have a lot of money, and they spend a lot of time producing this kind of material that's distributed online. Just be aware of it. You know, Brendan, I see this stuff. I see when I read that propaganda, I see it differently than a lot of other people do because it sheds light on things. I kind of look at it opposite, right? Why are they pushing that button? Why are they attacking the oil company? And what's the real purpose of that? And then I kind of look over here and I go, it's because they're deflecting from that, right? And why are they showing that picture of the pickup truck? Because it serves a dual purpose.
They
right?
want to create an enemy out of people who, well, mostly blue collar. And I mean, we've seen quite an interesting attack on pickup trucks in the past year where, let's see, in Ottawa, people have told the Ottawa Citizen newspaper that whenever they see a pickup truck, they start having post-traumatic stress symptoms.
That's right.
Let's see, there's been...
That shows you how effective the propaganda is, right?
Yeah. There was also other things out of Western Canada where it's like, they were like people with pickup trucks and that sort of stuff. Like, it's absolute nonsense. And that the pickup truck is the vehicle of the working man who has his tools in his lunchbox and he goes to his job site and he needs to carry lumber and all kinds of different cargo items and will also help you move, provided you provide him with beer and pizza after. It's like, we can't lose sight of that. That it's very important to our society and it's what keeps us moving. We absolutely like to take immigrants into our country, right? Well, you're not going to have housing for your immigrants if we don't have blue-collar Bob in his pickup truck going to job sites every day and building houses for them. It's all connected. And we're all connected. We all help make things in this society go. But it's ideologies like the other 98% that want to destroy that. They don't like that. They don't see the negative effects of what they're doing.
Maverick Multimedia, you can still watch RT on Rumble. Yeah, I'm aware of that. So, and you know, I personally, I think that's okay and that's a good thing because I think people should be allowed to view all of that kind of information. Because even as I don't like that other 98% propaganda group, but I still look at their stuff because it gives me a fuller perspective. I want to be able to see it because I want to know what their mindset is. I want to know what their perspective is, and I want to see how they're trying to manipulate people too, because it gives me a fuller perspective and a clearer worldview.
You know what? That's why it's like I told you today. I spent over an hour and a half of talking to somebody from the other side, and I didn't have to talk to that person. Mm-hmm. But the reason why I did is, A, how am I going to test myself? Are my ideas true?
So I told you, get him on the show.
I know, we're going to.
Call him up right now. Bring him on.
No, not right now. Coming up. And also, it's important to listen to the other side.
Yeah.
I find we have a very hard time with that these days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had conversations with fully fledged communists, but it didn't end up in me ripping out anybody's throat, right?
Sonia says it's $7 a gallon in California.
Ugh.
I said 8, but Yeah, 7 is probably more realistic.
$7, $8.
Yeah, I heard $8. Maybe it depends on where it is. I don't know, but it's in there. Eric, is somebody crapping your cornflakes this morning? Yeah, the fascio communists. That's who.
I'm sorry, that was good.
So what else do we have going on here?
Well, we got Justin Trudeau, Boris Johnson. We got Tamara Lich. We got...
Yeah, well, let's cue up that Justin Trudeau, Boris Johnson love fest.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to take that in today, so this is all new to me. Let's let that thing roll. And
myself included, it's all new to me too. I didn't watch it. I'm assuming Boris Johnson didn't bring his barber with him, but we'll see. And so we will let it rip. I need to just check on something really quick, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to welcome Prime Minister Trudeau and Prime Minister Rutte to London. During the excellent meetings that we've had today, we reaffirmed that our three countries stand shoulder to shoulder against Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. In the 12 days since Russia launched this illegal and brutal assault, the world has come together in solidarity with the indomitable people of Ukraine. Last week, 141 countries, nearly three-quarters of the entire membership of the United Nations, voted to condemn Putin's war. And 39 countries, including the UK, Canada, and the Netherlands, voted to refer Putin's actions to the International Criminal Court. This is the largest such action the court has ever seen and will allow the chief prosecutor to open an investigation to ensure Putin cannot commit these crimes with impunity. As Ukrainians resist Russia's onslaught with courage and tenacity, the international community must aid their struggle in every way that we can. We will only succeed if the whole international community moves together with the same spirit of unity that we've seen in recent days. Justin and Mark and I have been discussing that today, and later this afternoon I'm going to be speaking to the leaders of the United States, France and Germany further to coordinate our actions. To aid these efforts, today the UK is joining our Dutch and Canadian friends to mobilise more practical and sustained support for Ukraine. Our new International Ukraine Support Group will coordinate the efforts of the international community to provide long-term and unwavering assistance now and in the future. And we will be encouraging more countries to join us. This is the moment for Ukraine's friends to create a coalition of humanitarian, economic, and defensive military support to ensure that Putin fails. And that's why today I'm announcing a further £175 million of UK aid for Ukraine, $100 million of which will be provided directly to the Ukrainian government. This brings the total UK support announced during this crisis to around £400 million. After 12 days, it's already clear that Putin has made a miscalculation. He has underestimated the Ukrainians, their heroic resistance. He's underestimated their leader. And he has underestimated the unity of the West. And we will continue as colleagues to do everything we can to strengthen that unity in the days ahead to ensure that Putin fails in this catastrophic invasion of Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister Johnson, for hosting. It's great to be joined here by Prime Minister Rutte as well. It's been a very productive first day of my trip to Europe. We've been focused on solidarity with partners and allies. We're focused on stronger economic ties, jobs, growth, and support for the middle class, but also, obviously, for standing up for democracy against authoritarianism and standing with Ukraine every step of the way. This morning, I was able to have an audience with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II at Windsor Castle. We congratulated her, obviously, on the Platinum Jubilee, and was able to talk a little bit about the situations we're facing and draw on her long experience for having seen much over these past decades. When I met earlier with Boris, we discussed stronger security ties, continuing to defend our shared values, continuing to our work together on advancing free trade and creating more middle-class jobs, and also on climate action, where we need to build a sustainable, secure future. I also had a bilateral meeting with Mark Rutte, where we talked about the enhanced importance of NATO, continuing to work together to fight disinformation and protecting freedom of the press, and continuing to work strongly with our friends in the European Union. But of course, throughout, the focus is on the people of Ukraine and our solidarity with Ukraine, our pushing back against the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine, and standing up for democracies around the world. Le Premier ministre Johnson, le Premier ministre Rutte et moi avons parlé de notre réponse commune face à la Russie. On se mobilise pour répondre à la crise humanitaire. On insiste pour que la Russie implémente un cessez-le-feu pour protéger la population civile. Et évidemment, on insiste que la Russie met fin à son invasion et quitte l'Ukraine. Canada, UK, and the Netherlands are close defense partners. We're working together to mobilize the global community to step up to support Ukraine, and we'll continue to defend democracy and the values that underpin it, and continue to make sure that Putin is held accountable. Today, Canada is announcing new sanctions on 10 individuals complicit in this unjustified invasion. This includes former and current senior government officials, oligarchs, and supporters of Russian leadership. The names of these individuals come from a list compiled by jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny. These sanctions put increased pressure on Russia's leadership, including on Putin's inner circle. This is, of course, in addition to all the other sanctions we've announced, including our recent announcement on imposing massive tariffs on Russian and Belarusian imports. The work we're doing together is punishing Putin and his enablers where it hurts most, in particular by crippling their financial systems and sanctioning their central bank. So far, in aid for Ukraine, Canada has sent about $1 billion worth of financial assistance and humanitarian aid, but we have more to do. Demain, je serai en Lettonie pour rencontrer le Premier ministre Kariņš, d'autres dirigeants et le secrétaire général de l'OTAN, Jens Stoltenberg. For today, we continue to stand with Ukraine, united and strong.
We are here today as close transatlantic NATO allies. Throughout history, our countries have always been closely linked. And in times of crisis, in times of war, we stand shoulder to shoulder. And so today, as war and violence once again cast a dark shadow over Europe, we are working together for peace and security on the European continent. And I'd like to thank Prime Minister Johnson. Boris, I thank you so much for bringing us together today at this timely moment. Because it has been another weekend of horrific violence in Ukraine. We knew it already, but in recent days it has been confirmed that Putin remains unmoved. We are dealing with an aggressor who keeps crossing new boundaries. Civilians and civilian targets, and even a nuclear power plant, have been attacked recently. And we know now that Putin has used cluster bombs. We can only guess what he plans to do next. But one thing is certain, Russia's aggression must stop. And in our meeting this morning, we again stressed the importance of unity. To all Ukrainians, we say this: your courage and your resistance, exemplified by President Volodymyr Zelensky, deserves our utmost respect. Your resolve is our resolve. We will continue to stand by you. In the past few days, aid and military supplies have been sent to Ukraine from the Netherlands, as well as the UK and Canada. And we will continue to do everything we can to help Canada. The Netherlands is prepared to consider, and we are all prepared to consider, all possible sanctions that can help put pressure on Russia. And obviously there's a lot of debate going on about energy sanctions. And here we should not make a mistake. We have to ensure that they don't generate unmanageable risks to energy supplies in European countries and beyond, including Ukraine, as has also been stated today by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and I think rightly so. So that means that we still need European companies to continue their work towards Russia. And that is important. And of course, what we need to do over time is to make sure that we reduce dramatically our energy dependency on Russia. That's clear. Finally, I am pleased that there is a broad international agreement on the fact that possible war crimes must be investigated. We must document everything that points towards human rights violations now, so that when the time comes, we can prosecute and try those responsible. Peace and justice must win out over violence and injustice.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, Justin. Let's go now to the media. Gary Gibbon, Channel 4.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Could you elaborate perhaps a bit more about the energy discussions and where they're going? The US Secretary of State said there are active discussions for an oil ban from Europe. It sounds as though you don't feel that's the case, Prime Minister. And you, Prime Minister, your views are characterised in the newspapers this morning as saying the West should have a climate change pass. Should we bust through the caps for a while in order to insulate Europe from Russia, whether it's going to turn supplies off or we're going to walk away from them in Europe? And one quick one, if I may, to you specifically, Prime Minister, on refugees. Whether the numbers are still 50 that have come to this country or have gone up a little. It seems like they've only gone up a little. Isn't that embarrassing?
Thanks. Well, let me just before I bring in colleagues on the hydrocarbons issue, I think there are different dependencies in different countries, and we have to be mindful of that. And you can't simply close down use of oil and gas overnight, even from Russia. That's obviously not something that every country around the world can do. We can go fast in the UK. Other countries can go fast, but there are different dependencies. What we need to do is to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction and we all share the same assumptions, and that we accelerate that move. And I think that is what you're going to see, and you've heard that from leaders around the world. And actually, I see no inconsistency, by the way, in moving away from dependency on Russian hydrocarbons to moving away from dependency on hydrocarbons altogether. And you can see how this will encourage the world to go, Gary, for green solutions wherever possible. But clearly, there is going to be a transitional period. We're going to have to look for supply. We're going to have to look for substitute supplies from elsewhere, and we're going to have to do it together across the entire coalition of countries that is now condemning Putin's actions. And on your point about the UK's reception of refugees, we are absolutely determined to be as generous as we possibly can. And as I speak to you all, we're processing thousands, clearly, of applications. Clearly, as the situation has got worse, we are going to have to make sure that we do even more. And the routes that we have, that already the family reunion route offers the prospect of hundreds of thousands coming here. The humanitarian sponsorship route is also uncapped, and we're putting people out into all the surrounding countries, into Poland, into Bulgaria, Romania, as well as into Calais, to France, to make sure that we receive people and we help people to come. Don't forget, the UK since 2015 has been the most generous, and with great respect to Mark and all other European colleagues, we've been the most generous of all European countries in settling vulnerable people. We took a large number of Afghan refugees, as you remember, under Pitting, and we will and 104,000 Hong Kong Chinese have applied under our scheme. We will be very, very generous, as the people of this country would expect and would want to people fleeing the war in Ukraine. And I know that's going to be the instinct of the British people. But colleagues, on the hydrocarbons.
Well, the painful reality is that we are still very much dependent on Russian gas and Russian oil. And if we now would force European companies to quit doing business with Russia, that would have enormous ramifications around Europe, including Ukraine, but also around the world. So we have to dramatically reduce our dependency on gas and oil from Russia. That will take time. A statement earlier today by Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, I think, was in the same direction. So the painful reality is there. And that means that we have to be very clear and make no mistakes here. This is a step-by-step approach, and that means that we have to make sure that the energy supplies in this part of the world, again, including Ukraine, but also in the rest of the world, are not hindered, and that will take time.
I think what is clear is that many countries have realized that continued reliance on Russia's oil and gas is a problem for the future. And what we're seeing with the solidarity and the unity, not just of countries and democracies across Europe and North America, but indeed countries around the world looking at trying to secure more reliable sources of energy, particularly green sources. What we're seeing is a shift in Europe and elsewhere to understand that Russia is no longer a reliable partner. What Vladimir Putin has broken here is a trust where, for a number of Europeans reflect on, it's too bad that we are so dependent on Russian oil, but we're not going to make that mistake again, and they are moving away from it. Canada imports negligible amounts of Russian petrochemicals and oil. We've banned that, but we are, of course, self-sustainable in terms of oil and energy, but we will be there to support as the world moves beyond Russian oil and indeed beyond fossil fuels to have more renewables in our mix.
Thanks very much, Gary. Raymond Fillion of TVA.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Au cours des derniers jours, il y a plusieurs pays qui ont fait savoir qu'ils s'apprêtent ou qu'ils vont annoncer des augmentations importantes de leur budget militaire. L'Allemagne vient d'annoncer qu'ils vont passer de 1,4% de son PIB, qui est le niveau canadien, à 2%. Ma question, que va faire le Canada? What will Canada do with regards to its military spending right now? If you can answer in both official languages.
Comme vous savez, il y a plusieurs années, on a mis de l'avant un plan pour augmenter nos investissements militaires d'à peu près 70% au Canada et on continue de suivre ce plan, mais on regarde attentivement les besoins et la réalité de la situation. On a un budget qui s'en vient, nous sommes en réflexion sur les investissements qu'on doit faire, mais on reconnaît à quel point c'est important d'assurer que nos forces armées ont les outils nécessaires pour protéger le Canada et participer pleinement aux missions de l'OTAN où on a toujours été. On est en train de regarder ça. As you know, a number of years ago we put forward a defense plan that included increasing our defense spending by 70%, but we also recognize that the context is changing rapidly around the world, and we need to make sure that the women and men who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces have all the equipment necessary to be able to stand strongly, as we always have as members of NATO, and we will continue to look at what more we can do.
Thanks very much, Justin. Fleur Lansbach from NOS.
Hello. I have a question for Prime Minister Johnson. Last week there was a journalist in Poland that asked you, why do Ukrainians have to flee their homes? Why are their children taking the hit in this war, while Putin's friends and his inner circle are still living in London's most beautiful houses and taking their children to private schools? I was just wondering, has anything changed since that question was asked?
Thank you very much, Fleur. Yes, it certainly has. And I think that if you look at what we've done just today with the economic crime bill, we're taking steps to ensure that we whip aside the veil of anonymity that obscures the ownership of the properties that you described. So you can no longer use a bogus company to conceal your ownership of a property. Where we are making sure that we have new powers to distrain, to take people's assets, and we think that will have. We think that the whole package of measures that we're putting forward today will have royal assent in just a few days' time. So we're moving very, very fast on that. But Fleur, I hope that our viewers and all of you will recognise that is in addition to the huge work that the UK has done together with Mark and with Justin on the big package of international sanctions. And if you look at what we did on together on SWIFT, what we did on the Russian central bank, it's already had a profound effect. And I think I'm right in saying that even today the Russian stock market is not opening. And it is not a testimonial I necessarily seek, but I observe that the Russian foreign ministry said that the UK had not been entirely helpful in this regard towards their own economic interests. And I'm sure you'll have seen what she said. And we are going to continue to work with colleagues to ensure that we tighten the vice around President Putin's regime. Look, what's happening now is that the president of Russia is plainly doubling down. He's decided that he's going to continue with an all-out onslaught on centres of habitation in a way that we think is utterly repugnant. It's clear that we're going to have to do more, and as friends and partners, that's what we're going to do. I don't think that question was for anybody else. Let's go to Jason Groves from the Daily Mail.
Thank you. You've all had some success with your sanctions. They're squeezing Russia, but they're also having an impact here. We've seen the gas price treble. We're seeing petrol prices heading towards £2 a litre. What would you say, Prime Minister, to people who desperately want to help but are worried about that? Can you give a commitment now that there is going to be more help on the way? Mr Trudeau, can I ask, is Canada ready to increase its oil and gas output to help wean Mr Rutte and others off that Russian gas? And also, you've seen the Queen today. How is she? We've not seen her for a while. Is she fighting fit?
Jason, look, a really important question that I think everybody is going to be thinking. That everybody's seen what's happened to the price of oil. This matters deeply, which is why I think what Mark had to say earlier on about the need to proceed in steps is correct, and we must do everything we can to protect consumers and the public. There are going to be impacts. Let's be in no doubt there are going to be impacts, but I think that it's the right thing to do. But we've got to, and it's the right thing. It's completely the right thing to do to move away from Russian hydrocarbons, from dependence on Russian hydrocarbons. But we've got to do it step by step. So far, the success of the West has been in the unity that we've shown. I think we're all increasingly united in the view that we've got to move away now from Russian hydrocarbons. We've got to do it together. We've got to make sure that we have substitute and substitute supply, and that's what we're working on as well.
And is there going to be more help on the way?
We will do everything that we can to ensure that we have substitute and substitute supply. So
They have no
one of the
answer.
things that we're looking at is the possibility.
Trump told them that when he was in office.
Using more of our own hydrocarbons, and you'll have heard already.
He won't let Justin Trudeau answer
the business secretary has had to say about licenses for UK own domestic production. That doesn't mean that we are in any way abandoning our commitment to reducing CO2. You can do that, but we've got to reflect the reality that there is a crunch on at the moment. We need to intensify our self-reliance as a transition with more hydrocarbons. But what we also need to do is go for more nuclear and much more use of renewable energy. And I'm going to be setting out an energy strategy, an energy supply strategy for the country in the days ahead, so that people have a sense of how we're going to meet people's needs over the short, medium, and long term.
Let Justin answer.
Sorry, Justin. Sorry.
It's all good. What we learned over the past couple of years is that global challenges have impacts domestically. COVID crisis was a perfect example of disrupted supply chains that led to significant inflation challenges around the world. We made a promise to Canadians that we'd have people's backs, and that's exactly what we've been focused on. the challenge right now of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine is having ripple effects around the world, not just in energy prices for Canadians and for people in Europe, but for people in the global south as well. Disruption of the UN food program, disruptions that are happening that we are going to have to adjust to, and we're going to have to make sure we are there for each other. And that is the focus that we have as partners.
We're all in it together.
It's why we've all been reaching out around the world to talk with fellow leaders about the challenges they're facing, the challenges their people are facing. Because what we are learning about Russia's unreliability as a trading partner needs to be remembered, but we also have to work together to provide substitutes, to provide alternatives. And of course, we need to move forward to decarbonizing our economies, but we need to do that in a way that supports people through that process, and we're going to continue doing that. In regards to Her Majesty, I have the particular privilege of having known Her Majesty for about 45 years now, and I can tell you that in my conversation with her this morning, she was as insightful and perspicacious as ever, very interested in what's going on, asked me all sorts of questions about Canada, and we had a really useful, for me anyway, conversation about global events, as we always do.
Thanks very much, Justin. Okay, Marika Walsh from the Globe and Mail.
Good afternoon. Thank you. A few questions for all three of you. You're talking about this humanitarian coalition. What exactly is that? What good will it do for the people of Ukraine concretely? And regarding sanctions, Prime Minister Trudeau is announcing more today, but we haven't seen it actually change the behavior of Russia in Ukraine. So is enough being done on that? And Prime Minister Johnson, particularly for you, you spend more than the 2% target in NATO. Canada spends well less. Is that acceptable to you?
Do you want to have a go at that first?
Go
okay, well, thank you, Marika. Marika, thank you very much. Look, yes, it's true. We spend about 2.4% now. Look, I think that Canada is a fantastic ally, friend, and partner, and I'm not going to make any comment on Canada's approach, except to say this: that I do think that the world is clearly changing, and I think that what we can't do post the invasion of Ukraine is assume that we can go back to a kind of status quo ante, a kind of new normalization in the way that we did after the invasion of Crimea in 2014, or the seizure of Crimea and the Donbass area. We've got to recognize that things have changed and that we need a new focus on our collective security. And I think that is kind of increasingly understood by everybody. And on your first point about what the humanitarian coalition, look, I mean, the whole world is now coming together to try to help avert a total catastrophe in Ukraine. It's already very, very grim indeed. We're doing everything in our power to prevent it from getting worse. And one of the most important things is to look after people fleeing the war zone, and all of us in our different ways are doing a lot. And you'll have heard the sums that we've announced today to help the immediate vicinity and what we're doing to take people. I know that both the gentlemen who are here with me, their countries have a fantastic record of humanitarian help.
Well, on defense spending, we decided early January, when the new cabinet started, to ramp up defense spending by billions of euros. And that will bring us close to the 2%. And probably we need to do more, particularly given what has happened over the last 2 weeks. But the Netherlands will spend a lot of extra money on defense, and I think rightly so. The humanitarian coalition, I think it is crucial that this is not only NATO, European Union working together, but that it is the whole world coming together to defend the basic values and the international legal order as it has been established after the Second World War, and which is now being challenged by one country invading the second biggest European nation, being Ukraine, being invaded by the biggest European nation. So this is a huge event, and this has huge impact on the whole world. And we have to bring together Africa, Latin America, Asia, everyone who wants to be part of humanity, to be part of such a humanitarian coalition. And yes, I agree with you. The sanctions so far have not had the desired effect. They have a huge effect on Russia. They are not against the Russians, but against the Russian leadership. But of course, it will have an effect unavoidably and ultimately also on individual Russians that we cannot prevent. And I think in the longer term it will have a big impact on Russia. It will also have an impact on how they will move forward. But you're absolutely right, at the moment, in the short term, it has not led to the result that they stopped the invasion. That's true.
But that's why we are resolved in being there for the long term. The courage of Ukrainians in standing up to the Russian invaders has inspired and humbled us all. And we need to show ourselves as determined to push back against Putin, against the Kremlin, as hard as we can and as effectively as we can. And that's where, I mean, from the beginning, Boris and I and a couple of others were pushing so hard on SWIFT, on the central banks, on the Russian central bank, including going after their ability to draw on their reserves, something that even a week ago we didn't think would be in the cards. And yet, seeing just how strongly democracies around the world have stood and responded, I think is a surprise to Putin, perhaps a little bit of a surprise to all of us as well, that we actually can stand and push back really hard for the principles that drive us. And quite frankly, the unprecedented display of support of 141 countries at the United Nations supporting this resolution means that as we move forward, this is, of course, about Ukrainians and Ukraine, but it's also about more than that. It's about standing up for the rules-based order that has led to unprecedented peace and stability and growth around the world over the past many decades, and the pushback that one, like Russia, like Putin specifically, cannot overthrow those 75 plus years of peace and stability and still benefit from the economic largesse and growth that comes with that. And that firmness is not just Western democracies like us. That is something that we've heard in our conversations, all three of us, with partners around the world who don't have the same kinds of ties to Ukraine, but are very, very concerned about the violation of the rule of law, the principle that suddenly might be right once again, the principle of territorial integrity, respect for sovereignty, the kind of neo-colonialism that Vladimir Putin is trying to impose upon Ukrainians. That's not going to fly. And the strength and the resolve of countries around the world to say, no, this is a moment to stand for democracy, against disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, and to stay true to these values that have led to respect and prosperity around the world that we continue to need to fight for, including in many different parts of the world, whether it's Afghanistan or elsewhere as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
OK. Excuse. Mais plus court. Nous savons qu'on a vu une démonstration extrêmement forte aux Nations Unies de 141 pays qui se sont ralliés. Ce n'est pas tous des pays qui ont des liens étroits avec l'Ukraine, comme le Canada ou beaucoup de pays européens. C'est des pays qui ont indiqué que le respect des principes de l'ordre international, des partenariats et de la stabilité qu'on a bâtie au courant des dernières décennies est importante. C'est des pays qui se rassemblent pour ces valeurs, ces principes qui ont mené à une prospérité, et la Russie ne peut pas violer cette paix et penser profiter de cette prospérité. C'est un moment important pour le monde de démontrer qu'on est là pour se tenir debout contre la violation des principes fondamentaux.
Thank you very much, Justin. Last question is to Joost Dobber of Financieel Dagblad.
Thank you. You have all stressed the importance of unity in the Western response to Russia. But when it comes to energy sanctions, there seems to be a big difference between your position and the position of the United States. With Secretary of State Blinken coming out in favor of an oil ban and also saying that there are advanced discussions with the Europeans about this. Was the American Secretary of State wrong to say that there are advanced discussions? And Prime Minister Rutte, can you please also elaborate what the discussions you are having in the European Union context are about this? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so let me just say quickly that no, I don't think Tony Blinken was wrong in the sense that we're all together now moving very, very fast and seeing that something that perhaps 3 or 4 weeks ago we would never have considered is now very much on the table. We have to consider how we can all move away as fast as possible from dependence, reliance on Russian hydrocarbons, Russian oil and gas. And everybody's doing that. Everybody's on the same journey. Some countries will find it faster and easier than others. That's all. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it together because, and we're going to work together on making sure that we all have the substitutes and the supplies that we need.
I agree. And if so, in that sense, it is a step-by-step process, and we have to make sure to deleverage our dependency on Russian gas and Russian oil, whilst acknowledging at the moment that that dependency is to a certain extent still there. And if we would force companies to quit doing business with Russia in that realm, that would have enormous consequences, because it would basically undermine supply chains the world over, particularly in Europe. It would also have an impact on Ukraine itself. And therefore, my plea is to do this diligently and not overnight, and making sure that we speed up the programs in all our countries to decarbonize, to green our economies. It makes it the more important to do that.
Okay, everybody, thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues, very much indeed. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you.
First words to you, Brandon. What do you think?
Well, there's an old expression in the business world. It's another meeting that could have been an email. What a waste of time. What a bunch of virtue signaling cowards. Where to start? So, as always, when they talked about the invasion of Ukraine, they go, the illegal Russian occupation of Ukraine. Okay. It's quite laughable that Justin Trudeau is making statements such as, we need to defend democracy, when he has done everything in his political career to shit all over democracy. He doesn't care about democracy. He doesn't hold democratic principles to heart. And we've seen that when he spent $600 million on journalists secretly before an election. We see that when he drives wedges between Canadians on important issues. We see that in his entire political career. All the sanctions that they've kind of been talking about are things that are just going to hurt regular people. They're going to hurt regular Russians, and they're going to hurt Europeans and Canadians and Americans. It's going to be no shortage of that. Massive tariffs on Russian and Belarusians. Those will also hurt Canadians a lot. It's going to drive up the price of goods because manufacturers won't be shipping goods out there. And when they do, it'll be really expensive and add prices to it. My favorite part of this was the Globe and Mail reporter pointed out that Canada pays below 2% for NATO. And Justin Trudeau didn't really speak to it like at all. It was probably my favorite moment about that. And yeah, it's what a mess. Like, everything that they're talking about here is ridiculous. And the only reason why I could see the Netherlands was there is I looked it up, and they exported in 2019 $46.2 billion in refined petroleum, the third largest exporter of refined petroleum in the world. I believe their economy is pretty strictly tied to it. And if they're going to be talking about kicking Europe off of natural gas coming out of Russia, like, that's a business opportunity if I ever seen one, to to scoop in and get a whole new monopoly on something. They're scheming here, just like every other war, basically, where they're calculating who's going to get what spoils out of it.
These guys might just get us all killed.
Yep.
They could get us all blown to bits, vaporized. Think about this. What did they talk about? They were wasting their breath talking about all of these things, but what happened today? There were peace talks. There were negotiations aimed at ending the hostilities. Did they even mention it?
No.
Putin laid out 4 different things that he wants in order to bring the hostilities to an immediate end. So you've got 4 things that could be addressed to end this thing right now. These 3 dudes, these jokers, our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, didn't even mention it. Did I hear anything about it? Did you hear anything about it?
No, not
Anything.
a single thing was talked about.
Not one syllable. Not one syllable. They're ignoring him. That's the problem. They are not listening. The media. There's some talk about this negotiation that took place today, but what the hell is wrong with these guys? They're not interested in peace. That's the problem. They're not listening to Vladimir Putin. That's the problem. We're on the verge of a potential nuclear conflict, and these guys still aren't listening. They're still virtue signaling. They're focused on winning. They just want to win. Because why, Brendan? Because they do want to go into Ukraine. They do want Ukraine to be a NATO country. They do want to put missiles in there. They want them on Vladimir Putin's front step. They do want regime change in Russia. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to admit it, but that is what they want. And why? Because they are globalists. They want to take over the goddamn world. That's what they're focused on. They want a one world government, and the one country in the world that's standing in the way of that is and has been for a very, very long time, Russia. Russia. These are fascio communists. Some of the people running the WEF, in fact, most of them, are actual Nazis. Some of the people fighting on the front lines and controlling the government in Ukraine are actual Nazis. Azov, the Banderites, others we've shown you, actual Nazis. This is a fascio communist movement, and they are focused on moving into Russia. Make no mistake, I am not a Russian stooge. I'm not an apologist for Vladimir Putin. I don't want to see this thing drag on, but he is, in this particular case, I think, making it very clear what his concerns are and what he wants. He laid them out again. 4 points. He's been doing this for over 8 years. And even today, as people are dying and blood is being spilled, and people are volunteering to go over there and fight because of the misinformation they're getting from the legacy media in the West, and the doublespeak we're getting from people like Justin Trudeau, who again is talking about misinformation, which is what he has been spewing for I don't know how long.
Or misinformation and disinformation.
This is completely irresponsible.
Yeah.
This is costing people's lives. These 3 stooges don't want to talk peace. They don't want to negotiate. They just want their way. They are there to do the bidding of the WEF and the globalist movement. That's what they're doing. It's very clear. They didn't even mention these negotiations today. That's where the hope to end this is, because the only other way to end it is with more blood. And the longer this goes on and the more that it escalates, the closer we get to a potential nuclear conflict. And that's a very real possibility. The more the West pushes, the more they push into Ukraine, the more military lethal aid they put in there, the more potential there is for a nuclear conflict. And even if it doesn't get to that point, a lot more people are going to die. But they've got an opportunity right now to end this thing. Why don't they? Why couldn't they talk about it? Why couldn't they address it? Because they're not interested, and they seem to not care. They talk about humanitarian aid. You know what they're going to end up doing? They're going to end up dropping food on a bunch of dead people. They need to wake the hell up. And we need to hold them accountable. They're the ones talking about, I mean, they stood there and talked about war crimes being committed by Russia, but they don't even want to take any steps to end the conflict.
What type of message does it send when all of these leaders say they're going to pledge over $300 million to the country that they are supporting in this, that's not including weapons and aid? The message I think that it sends is they want to drag this out as long as possible, allowing for the worst possible things to happen, just like Rick is saying, for Western intervention to apply, which in turn will get us all killed.
They're not dealing with a tin pot dictator. They're not dealing with a Saddam Hussein here. They're dealing with the number 2 military power in the world. Mm-hmm. And they are outgunned on conventional forces, but they have the upper hand on a nuclear conflict. And the reality is Russia could potentially survive a nuclear war, and that gives them much more resolve on that front. If it were to come to that, they are much more likely to use nuclear weapons, and Vladimir Putin has already alluded to that. And you know what? This is a guy who has assassinated people. He has killed people. He has made it clear that he has very strong resolve when it comes to preserving the sovereignty of his country. And if he is threatening to use nuclear weapons because he knows he has defenses against the ICBMs that might come from the West, and he thinks that it's a winnable thing, I think that there's just enough insanity on both sides that it could actually happen, and they should take him very, very seriously. These guys, Trudeau, Yeltsin, or Johnson rather, they're arrogant, overconfident, and they think that they can take this arm's length approach and play this stupid game where, we're not really involved. The United States talked today about sending jets because the Ukrainian Air Force was destroyed. So they're going to send American jets, but not pilots. What a load of BS. It's like, well, we're not really involved. We're just going to send them all the weapons. We're not going to send pilots, but we'll send the fighter jets. We'll send a bunch of A-10s and they can bomb them with the warthogs. I mean, what the
prop
hell?
Up their economy and artificially inflate their
and impose sanctions
their money.
And you know, this is a very, very stupid, dumb, dangerous game they are playing. And they're playing with our lives. It's our lives that hang in the balance. Do you think Justin Trudeau is going to be in Canada when the ICBMs start to fly? Do you really think so? I don't. I think he's going to be off in some other country or in some place that's not going to be a target. He won't die.
He's a globalist. He doesn't care if he fucks Canada to the ground.
None of these guys
at the end of the day, they can destroy and wreck whatever environment they live in and just pick up and go to a different one.
They are not being transparent with us. They are not being completely honest with us. They have an agenda. They have an agenda.
Big time.
And that agenda does involve pushing into Ukraine. It does involve a desire to, at some point in the future, they would like to see Russia dismantled and controlled so that it too comes under the umbrella of a one world government. I'm telling you, they spoke volumes by not speaking about peace in that address. You just saw it. It's not what they said, it's what they didn't say. You have to listen carefully. And if you don't, you miss it. Sometimes it's what they don't say.
And speaking of that, it was very interesting how they were talking about energy and hydrocarbon. And you notice nobody was going to commit to more hydrocarbon.
And no one's talking about. Justin Trudeau didn't say, "Don't worry, guys."
Just a moment. Just a moment. So nobody talked about that, which would have been the right thing to talk about if you asked me. But then it turned into a little bit of a fight between them and the press about green energy. Like, that's what all this woke crap does. Is they can't agree on a bloody thing, and they're going to run us all into the ground.
They're gonna get us killed if we're not careful and we don't hold them accountable.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about these yahoos than I am about Putin.
Yeah.
These guys, they're out of control. If you can support us, go to freedomreporters.com. We have a lot more work to do, obviously, to spread more information, not misinformation, real information, so that you can make educated choices, informed decisions when you go to the polls. And I watched. I'm just flabbergasted. They didn't even talk about the peace talks.
Or any of the peace talks that have happened.
That's what has been going on for over 8 years. And you know what else? Oh, Brendan. We talked about Justin. You know, he's not a popular guy these days. And when he was over in the UK today, he was so unpopular that he actually had to slide in a side door. Normally, when a Canadian Prime Minister visits, pays the PM in the UK a visit, they go in the front door and they make a photo op of it. But when he went to see Boris Johnson, he had to go in a side door. And
that looks like the scene out of some awful romance movie. Or should it be like bromance movie? Like, look at him. He's like, Justin is in that I'm gonna hug you posture, and Boris Johnson's like ready to receive him.
So this is why he had to go in the side door today. It was because of this. Oh, hang on. Here we go. Let's roll this back. Oh, he was a media darling for a long time, and all the reporters wanted to know was who did his hair and where did he buy his socks. I wonder if you'll try to freeze their bank accounts.
Get inside, Justin. Get inside. I can't hide you here. It's probably going to run him up to the attic. You can hide in here, Justin. You'll be safe. Take the security blankie.
So the
That made me feel so much better after watching that.
I'm not sure, but
Don't you feel better?
Do you think maybe the honeymoon for Justin is over?
Not with Boris Johnson, it's not. It's only started.
Oh my. Terrible, 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 terrible.
I'm so glad you chose to play that after the fact because it just made me feel so much better. Oh gosh, that's mercy. Jeez.
Well,
looks to me like our UK brethren are holding it strong.
Here's another angle. I think they made that illegal here, right? Yeah, and on Parliament Hill on the weekend, they've made it illegal to carry around a F. Trudeau flags now. So if you're caught up there with an F. Trudeau flag, you could get hit in a whole lot of new heaping help of legal trouble. So leave your F. Trudeau flags at home if you go to Ottawa, because now you'll be labeled a domestic terrorist.
Get your bank account frozen.
Yeah. And there he goes, Mr. Socks.
Play it one more time.
There you
just
go.
For me. One more time.
That's what they think of our prime minister in the UK.
So they're well aware of who Tamara Litch is.
Yeah, if you can support us again, freedomreporters.com. There's a link in the YouTube and Facebook descriptions as well. Yeah.
Also, you can support us by smashing that like button and hitting the subscribe button. Hit the bell for notification. And just remember, every time you donate to the Freedom Reporters, the communists cry, including Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, and then they were talking about holding Vladimir Putin accountable and investigating him for war crimes. To me, that seemed like an awful lot of posturing, tough talk, and I don't think anything will come of that. But,
Oh, see, the people have spoke. Miss Jensky wants to hear it again. So do I.
Oh, really?
One more time.
Well, let me see if I can find that.
One more time. You're absolutely right in regards to that point where you said about holding him account for these war crimes. It's like, what are you going to do? March in there and take him out? Like,
yeah, I think that's the point. That's what I'm saying. I think they do want to go in to Russia. I think that given a chance, NATO would go in there in a heartbeat. And they definitely want Ukraine. That's why they're not talking about peace. They don't want to engage in the peace talks. They're not even acknowledging that they happened today. They didn't even mention it. Why? Because they do want to go into Ukraine. They do want Ukraine to be a NATO country. They're not interested in keeping it as a buffer state or keeping it neutral, where both sides would really end up winning. They just want it all. They want all the marbles. They don't want to compromise. They don't want to even talk to Putin. They don't even acknowledge his perspective or point of view on it at all. They just don't. I mean, no. I guess you can look at it from the perspective of Ukraine is a sovereign nation. They can do whatever they want. And if they want to join NATO, they should have the right to do that. Therefore, we'll defend that right, and Putin can pound salt. And if he doesn't like it and he wants to go in there and go to war, then that's illegal, and we're going to stand up to him. But the reality of the situation is it's just like we laid out before. It's not any different than the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the reality is it has to be a more nuanced solution. I'm sorry, maybe, people don't want to hear that, but that's the truth. Ukraine sits right on Russia's doorstep. It used to be part of the former Soviet Union. You can't change the geography. And I think you have to, any reasonable person can see that having Ukraine as a NATO country with weapons on Putin's border could pose an existential threat to the country, to Russia. And I think it does. It most certainly does. The same as having missiles in Cuba did in the 1960s. Nuclear weapons pointed at the United States from Cuba, giving the Russians first strike capability. It's no different. Same issue, different day, different era. But right now we've got leaders who don't even want to talk on our side, and that scares the living daylights out of me.
All right, that's enough. Thank you. Okay. I also found it very interesting that Boris Johnson had admittedly stated, we are no longer going to allow bogus Russian companies to conceal ownership of property. We're going to seize the properties and that sort of thing. So basically, he just admitted they've been allowing bogus companies to own property in the UK that are connected to the Russians.
Well, I mean, that's the other part of this whole thing too, is we know Ukraine has been a corrupt country. We know that some of these politicians on our side have been engaged in a lot of that corruption. We know that's been going on in there, and some of them have been getting filthy rich, laundering money through Ukraine. So they have a conflict of interest with regard to this conflict. The President of the United States has a conflict of interest because we know that he's had business dealings, and his son has business dealings in Ukraine with Burisma and in other areas as well.
Yeah.
I just don't know, Brendan. This thing, all I see going on here is talks going on over here that probably aren't going to amount to anything because the people on our side still, even now, are just not willing to listen. And if you're not willing to listen, then it's just going to escalate. And Putin's not going to back down because he sees it as an existential threat. And our side, they say, well, screw you. You don't have any right to be in there. We don't want to listen to what you have to say. So that's the end of that discussion. And this is just going to keep on getting worse in the days ahead.
And I mean, I guess if you put it in this context, so this all happened on the same day of the peace talks. Zelensky is going in there and he's being inflamed by Western leaders before he goes in there. He has an artificial understanding of what his position is on this. And that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. This is inflaming the whole situation. This is due to a failure in diplomacy spanning 30 years, where we've had every opportunity to work with the Russians.
The thing is, if they gave Putin what he wanted, there's no downside for Ukraine. None.
Yeah.
Because if Ukraine remains a neutral country, neutrality, which is what he wants, and he wants that enshrined in the Constitution, he's not saying he wants to occupy it. He doesn't want to occupy Ukraine. He says he wants Ukraine to be a neutral country. It's laid right out in those conditions that we showed for you today. So what's the downside for Ukraine? There isn't any, because Ukraine remains a sovereign country. If it's a neutral country, it remains a democracy. They can continue to have elections. What are we supposed to be there fighting for? Democracy. So we just defended it, and they've got it. They still have a sovereign country. If they give Putin what he wants, what does Putin want? He wants to preserve Ukraine as a sovereign nation, governing itself as a neutral country, without his influence and without the influence of the West, so that it's not controlled by either side. So you've got what you want, a democratic, neutral country, free. So Where's the downside for the West? Well, the downside for the West is only that they don't get to go in there and control the country, I guess, right? But I guess that's why they don't want to talk about it. Because it doesn't make any goddamn sense. These things that they're talking about, oh, we need to, deal with the energy issue, and we need to send in more aid, and we're going to send in more military aid and some lethal weapons, and the U.S. is going to send some jets, and we're going to send more money so they can buy more weapons, and we're going to have innocent civilians volunteer and go over and fight alongside the Ukrainians because they're fighting like lions, and it's go Ukraine. And then people die. Where's the downside? I keep asking, where's the downside? There's no downside. Just give him what he wants, and Ukraine gets to. If you don't give Putin what he wants, which is to keep Ukraine neutral, then what are we doing? What are we doing? Well, what are we really fighting for then? If you're not fighting to keep Ukraine neutral and preserve democracy by keeping it a neutral country free of influence from either side, then what are we fighting for? Maybe it's because they want to keep their guy in office there and keep their influence there and keep the West's power in Ukraine and not keep it a neutral country and keep it under the West's control. Maybe that's what the media is not telling you. Does that make sense? That seems to make more sense to me. Maybe they're seeking regime change. I don't know, but I'll tell you this. It's not what they said. It's what they didn't say. And you can figure it all. And I'm just laying it out for you, folks. Just laying it out for you. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think it is now time to change gears because I don't think we should let this evening pass without talking about the bail of Tamara Lich.
Yes.
So, one of the main convoy protest organizers, Tamara Lich, was released from jail today. Yes, today, and there is a number of conditions which she has been provided with. I kind of would like your understanding on some of these points. So, the judge had ruled today that there's a number of conditions that Lich must follow in order for her bail to be continuous, so that she does not breach it. A surety is required. A cash bail deposit is not required. A $20,000 bond for a surety and a $5,000 bond for Tamara. Must leave Ottawa within 24 hours. Leave Ontario within 72 hours. Must report to the police regularly. Reside as directed. Must have no contact with the co-accused. No social media. No protesting COVID. A surety to monitor devices. Not to allow people to post messages on her behalf. Attend court as required and not attend Ontario except for court and meetings with counsel. So that's quite a lengthy amount of conditions that she has to comply with. This was from David Amber. He's a criminal lawyer in Ottawa, and he has been working with many of the people who have been impacted by the by the trucker convoy and the arrest thereof. She was arrested once again for counseling to commit mischief. Here's what David Amber had posted on Twitter, all of those conditions. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, there's more to the whole story than just that, because I know the judge did indicate that the previous judge who denied bail had made some errors, some legal errors, and this judge also talked about the severity of the crime and in a way talked about the potential punishment fitting the crime, and indicated that it's most likely that at the end of this process, Tamara Lich will probably end up facing a penalty of like time served or something like that, because it's basically a mischief charge, or counseling to commit mischief. And the prosecution, the Crown, seeking a 10-year sentence. The judge made it clear today, as I understand it, that it's unlikely that a sentence of that length would be likely at all in this particular case. So we're seeing some sense of reality, or some reality and a better, more realistic perspective taking shape over this case now, I think. These particular conditions, not that surprising. I don't like seeing things like no social media, no protesting COVID, things like that. I'm uncomfortable with that stuff because I'm a pro free speech guy, right? So I don't like seeing anyone's voice taken away. They want to silence her. They don't want her to say anything to anybody at any time about anything that they don't like. And they don't want her organizing any other protests. They don't want her doing anything that might result in trucks coming back to the nation's capital or anywhere else to cause any kind of disruption. They're trying to keep her in check. She has been a political prisoner.
Yeah, very much so. That's the definition of what they've done to her.
Yeah.
And we can prove that with that previous judge who denied her bail, Julie Bourgeois, and her ties to the Liberal Party of Canada and Justin Trudeau explicitly, where she was a candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada and was not elected. So the proof is right there in the pudding for anyone to see. This is hands down a political prisoner. They're asking for too much time on it. It's absolutely devastating. I would say about half of this stuff is overreaching, and they did the same thing to Pastor Arthur, who still is in jail, as well as his brother. These sureties here are designed to keep her going back to jail, I would say.
Well, as I said before, it's not. They're punishing her with the process.
Yeah.
They're using lawfare as their weapon. So the longer that's why they had that judge deny bail. They wanted to punish her by keeping her in jail as long as possible, because they know darn well that when the trial actually, when it actually goes to trial and a sentence is passed, if she's found guilty, then the sentence that might be passed is not going to be anywhere near what the prosecution is asking for. And they needed to get their licks in now while they have the opportunity. So I think that's how it's going to, is going to be how it goes down. Now, all that being said, I don't have a lot of confidence in the court system or the legal system in Canada either, because I think it's been captured by these fascio communists as well. And so
I think Tamara Lich and her situation puts that on red alert, like big time, that you have a judge with such close ties to the Prime Minister. It's almost sickening, where the judge is supposed to act autonomously from government, and like her bias is just all over the place. It's like you had stated from what you were reading today, that the previous judge, Julie Bourgeois, had made great errors with this, and she has spent more time in jail after being arrested than some people who have committed murder.
Well, look at what David Anber's comments are. He says, Ms. Litch is but one of a number of accused involved, and but one accused leaders. These are early days of the case. It will be with the fullness of time and with a trial that Ms. Litch's rule might be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, but it is not an overwhelming case, re egregious. That's right. So we don't even know if she'll be found guilty. She's not been found guilty at this point. And I think that the claim that this was an illegal protest, that in itself is debatable.
Yeah.
Very debatable.
That'll have to be established by the court. I really do wish that we were like America, where our courts could be televised, because man, that would be something to see. But it's a shame that we're only going to get like an outside perspective on it. But that will be the ticket here. This is going to push a very trampled understanding of what is acceptable to protest and what is not acceptable to protest. And I'm on board with the charter side of it, which states that I have the right to protest. So whatever they decide here, I don't think it's going to be good. But the best we can hope for is the prosecution screws up so badly that the judge is going to be forced to be like, your time served is going to be what you get. Which if they're going to be asking for 10 years, and that could be very egregious. Like the judge.
And I know that when judges pass sentence, they usually it's not uncommon, and it's most common that they apply double time for the amount of time served already before sentence is passed. That's a fairly regular procedure. So whatever the sentence is, she was in jail, I don't remember how many days, but that would probably
February
be
17th to now.
Yeah.
Which is a big chunk of time.
So she would be probably given, double that, say a month of time applied to any sentence that they might pass if she's found guilty, and if the sentence even warrants jail time for whatever offense she might be convicted of. And the judge said the offenses are serious, but not really that serious compared to more violent charges in the criminal code. These offenses are at a lower scale. That's what the judge said today. And the judge also said today that it is important to consider the strength of the Crown's case, far more aggravating aspects, and this is debatable. So the previous judge, I think, was not acting in a what's the right word? The scope and the scale, the perspective being applied, I don't think was appropriate.
No, it wasn't. Far from it.
And I agree with you, Brendan. I think it's because it was. I think this is, political.
Yeah, it's when you look this case up on CBC, you know where you find the article for it? Under the politics section.
Mm-hmm. Very good point.
Rest my case. Aha. Rah.
Very good point. Excellent observation.
And where the hell is BJ Dichter in all of this? Like, he has things. He's been pretty much the number one spokesperson for everything that happening. Tamara
No
Litch
charges. Yeah.
Tamara Litch was not on Fox News.
It is interesting, isn't it?
She didn't go on the Jordan Peterson podcast to make statements.
Where is BJ Dichter? Where is that guy? You're right. I mean, he was the guy who did all the interviews. He's the guy who made all these public appearances. Why isn't he charged? Why wasn't he, beaten and pummeled by the cops? Why doesn't he need a lawyer?
Well, he
That's
probably does
interesting.
have a lawyer. I would not doubt that.
I don't know. That's kind of interesting. We haven't seen anything. I haven't seen him. He seemed to sort of disappear right near the tail end of everything going on there, and yet I would say that he had a much higher profile than Tamara Litch did.
Considerably higher.
Yes, it's interesting that they didn't go after him. Why her and not him? And then they've got Pat King in jail, and that guy wasn't, honestly, he was not, from everything I saw, he wasn't one of the key organizers. He's a social media guy, and he went down there, and yeah, he gave himself a high profile on Facebook and was, talking to his viewers. But I know from things that he said, because I don't know him, I've never met him, and I don't mean to say anything negative about him at all, but from what I watched on a few of his feeds, and I didn't watch them all the time, but some of the things I saw, he even indicated they didn't let him into some of the meetings that the core group of organizers or planners held. So he wasn't even within the main circle. From everything I saw, he was trying to do his part and be involved and all of that. And like I said, he was posting all the time when he was up there. And I think that he kind of ran out into no man's land and sacrificed himself at the end. I'm not sure why he did that, but I guess we could maybe ask him sometime if he wants to come on the program and do an interview, which I would be totally open to, just to find out what he's all about. Because as I said, I really don't know him.
Who, Pat King?
Yeah, I don't know him at all.
I don't know him either. I don't know. I don't know really. I don't know how to read him. I don't think people would really appreciate my perspective on it, so I don't think I'm going to.
Yeah, so Go Free Speech says it's true Pat King was not a major leader, but he's an easier target. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That's
Big
exactly
time.
right.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, and Dichter was fully jabbed.
If you would do me the great pleasure, I was able to find his Twitter account.
Sure.
So Tamara Litch has been arrested and jailed, and how much?
Who is this guy?
BJ.
This is BJ Dichter? Oh, okay.
There he is. He's pinned this. He's like, see, this is him. He's the face of the Freedom Convoy movement.
Are these recent? This is January 27th.
That's his pinned tweet. So he's really proud of his interview with Tucker. So he
had a high profile. So is there anything recent that he's posted? An hour, okay.
Yeah, coming on March 17th, the first topic will be the many unanswered questions of what happened on February 19th from inside. Click to subscribe.
Okay. I do find it interesting though. Like he had such a high profile, and yet it's Tamara that they go after, and they don't go after him.
So he does have a.
I don't want the guy charged. I'm not trying to get him into trouble. I'm just wondering. Like, it's kind of weird.
It is really weird. It's very weird. It doesn't go with how justice should be distributed on it. Like, he just goes free. I don't know how to wrap my brain around it one way or another, but he's going to come out with his side, and he's going to be talking about it in his Substack, I guess. So what his perspective is on it will remain to be seen.
I think there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than anybody knows at this point.
As of March 5th, Freedom Convoy spokespeople Dagny Pollock and Benjamin Dichter issue concluding press release touting Convoy's achievements, including lifting of numerous provincial restrictions. So he did make an official statement. Which is quite lengthy.
Well, maybe we can review that and go into it more
Yeah,
tomorrow.
that'll be a project for tomorrow.
If it's worthy of more attention. Pretty interesting, though.
It's just very weird. But hey,
yeah,
we'll have to see. That's a good point that Tamara Litch was in charge of the GoFundMe. It had her name on it.
Yes. And I can understand why they would target her because she is high profile. She was extremely successful in generating those funds. So they really hate her. I shouldn't laugh. I mean, it's yeah. Rick Walker, Brendan Kennedy, they were infiltrators, just saying. Yeah, well, we're trying to be diplomatic here.
Yeah, we don't have any facts on that, so we're not going to speculate about it.
And yes,
it wouldn't surprise me, but I'm not going to speculate on it. I don't have enough data.
We'll have to see how it plays out. Pat King and George called out BJ. Yeah, I know. We're just, like I said, we're trying to be diplomatic, and I don't know.
Once we have something more conclusive, though, we definitely will share it and bring it from there.
I think people who are sort of in the know what we're talking about, and that's all I'm prepared to say about it, because without real information, I don't want to go any further than that, because I don't know some of these people personally. I wasn't involved directly, obviously, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. But it is very interesting.
Yeah, it's just weird that they're going to block Tamara from any social media, but here he is. He's like, I'm going to start my own Substack and this, that. He's free to do whatever he wants. And they're not worried about that? I don't know. I don't know about this. It could be that we have to wait until the court occurs and we find out what really happened. It could be. And then we'll have to see. I do wish Tamara Litch well, though. I'm certainly amazed at all of the things that the Freedom Convoy has achieved, and they have achieved many things.
I think we can go back to the People's Convoy here briefly, Brendan. I know that they've had some speeches happening out at Hagerstown Speedway, which is where the trucks have been staged. And from there, each morning, the last couple of days, they've been... hang on a second here. I'm going to get this queued up and take you out to Hagerstown Speedway. Here we go. So, yeah, there were some speeches out here. Let's pick this up and see what the folks had to say.
You hear that walk by? There was some talk or some reporter or something. Yeah, on Sunday, People's Convoy did 2 laps. Today they only did 1.
So, yeah, he says that they only actually did 1 lap around the Beltway today. Just going to pull this down. Here we go.
I was here for the Canadian people. We people of the world were united. And I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, that I love each and every one of you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over, and I'll be back later. Love you too. I'm going to start off real quick by, I'm going to start off the way we should always start, with a prayer.
Hats off.
You know, this morning in our little meeting, I was reminded of a Bible account of Moses when he was leading that mass multitude of millions of people out in the wilderness, and everybody had an opinion. And I thought, human nature never changes. We all still have an opinion, right? But you know what makes good leaders? Is good followers. That's just one trait. And I hope that we can all come together under God, unified with one message. So let's pray to God our Father. Lord, we thank you that you are God our Father. We thank you that you are the Creator. We thank you for Jesus Christ. We thank you for forgiveness of sin. And we pray that you would guide and direct with much wisdom and knowledge as proceedings are taking place. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.
I'm going to need everybody to step this way again real quick. Another convoy just pulled on in. If you haven't figured it out yet, this is the People's Convoy. And all these convoys coming in are all believing in the same message. That united we stand. Let's go ahead and let these folks come on in real quick. Not sure how many of them there are, but let's let them get on in. Then we're going to do the national anthem.
Yeah. Twice.
So a lot of trucks there, a lot of people. I know that they had on the weekend at least 1,000 trucks involved in the on the Sunday, yesterday's double lap trip around the Beltway.
Hey, I need everybody to do me a quick favor. Real loud up here, yell, "Hello, Ashland." Better? His wife's no longer mad at him.
It's all good.
He's at 109 now, I think. Awesome, guys. Get that silver play button there.
All right, next up, because remember, it's God, then country. God, then country. So now we're going to start off or follow up with the prayer with the national anthem, sung by this fine young gentleman over here that apparently has a better voice than me.
Hats off one more time.
Would you please, if you're sitting down, please stand and remove your hats.
Flag's over there, folks.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh,
Oh, say does the star-spangled banner yet wave? O'er the land of the free and the home of the
Yeah, Will Brown says Kamala. Oh, yeah.
How long, Brendan, do you think this?
Those of you that were here a couple days ago probably remember this doctor as the lock them up. No introduction needed. Y'all know who he is. Lock them up, Doc. Hey, how are you guys tonight? USA! 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 Long live the United States trucker! Long live the Canadian trucker who started this! Listen, this talk has to be short and sweet. As Brian said, I'm an academic scientist, etc., and I work with Dr. Pierre Corey in this convoy. Look, it's been such an honor and a privilege for me, and we've been here from Adelanto, Mojave, to here, and we are making some inroads with Brian's leadership and Mike, etc., and the rest of the leadership and all of the truckers to forge some discussions behind the scenes to try and work this out. Now, you know what happened in Canada. The government in Canada refused. They refused to sit with the truckers and have a discussion about what the needs were. And the needs were simple. The science does not support the vaccine mandates or any mandates, or the emergency declaration has no basis, and the trucker was not simply a gut feeling by you guys. You have 100% of the science behind you, and that is why we are here to support you. Long live the United States trucker! So, I don't want to take too much time, but you need to understand what happened. In Canada, why this started was the Canadian trucker was leaving Canada with ball bearings or parts or clothing or whatever to enter the United States. And the government in Canada imposed a restriction that for you, the Canadian trucker who crossed into Buffalo, or let's say Coots, or into Detroit, you would have to be double tested to get back into Canada and quarantine for 2 weeks. Only if you took a double vaccination would you be back allowed. So the Canadian trucker said, no, that is impossible. Why? Because the science showed them that the Omicron variant was so mild. It was at or below seasonal influenza in terms of risk, and it was below common cold. And moreover, the vaccine had failed. These vaccines do not stop transmission, so they are worthless. So the trucker was right, going to Ottawa. But what did the Prime Minister do? The Prime Minister refused to talk to them. And then after 3 weeks, he put the police on them and they brutalized the trucker. So what you are doing in America today, you're standing on the back of the Canadian trucker and you are going to finish it for them. Long live the United States trucker. Long live the Canadian trucker. USA, 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 USA. Amazing. up! Lock them up! Lock them up! Lock them up! Absolutely amazing. Well, now, I can't top that. I feel like you should have done like a mic drop. I'm going to start off like this. First and foremost, I want to give a huge hats off and a round of applause. We're going to do it a couple times, so bear with me here. Hats off, round of applause for all the extremely hardworking volunteers that remained behind when the convoy left. These folks emptied the trash, got dumpsters switched out, organized the food, emptied trailers, started picking up all the cigarette butts. Please pick up your cigarette butts, smokers. These folks, every single day, have been busting their butt nonstop. The folks parking people, the volunteer staff that is manning people. I won't say security, but keeping their head on a swivel for us and looking around for some of the bad actors that like to try to join us here. Don't worry, I know who you are too. You know who you are, and I know who you are. But it don't matter because you can't take this down. You can't take this down because it ain't about the left. It ain't about the right. It's about the people. It's about reminding the American government that they work for us. And guess what? Guess what? They learning it. We've had a couple, we'll call them small victories, but I'm proud of them anyways. We had a couple positive, good, small victories since being here. Since Adelanto, mask mandates have started rolling back. As we continue to progress down the road, we saw people lining the highways, and byways, and overpasses, cheering us on. Millions of people from Adelanto to here for the People's Convoy. And for the other convoys that have joined us today, they had the same exact thing on their routes. That means millions of people have turned out to say that they've had enough. Millions of people have now come out and are starting to stand up. Together, we can get this done. And what an amazing sight to see another convoy, made up, I believe, of a couple of convoys, come rolling in here right when we were getting ready to start doing this. It'd be perfect timing. I don't know all their names, but I know Kip at least. His name is Kip. I want to thank Kip and the folks working with Kip for bringing these convoys together like this. Everybody give them a round of applause for coming together. There's many more, just like the People's Convoy, where there's tires, where there are tons of people in the background working hard to make these kinds of things happen. Whether it's a conference call with 15 people that can't agree on anything, or it's a team of volunteers keeping the grounds clean. There are a lot of people working very hard to make this happen. But at the end of the day, all of their hard work is nothing if it isn't for the dedication, the patriotism, and the loyalty of all of you that have come out here to support this, to join this, and to sacrifice yourselves to be a part of this movement. Thank you from me, from all the other organizers. Thank all of you for being a part of this, because without you, this doesn't exist either. So round of applause for yourselves. Around the world, people are starting to stand up. Around the world, people are starting to understand that this has been a crime against humanity. This has been a major violation, not only for the American people, but people around the world, as Americans against our constitutional freedoms, but as human beings on a global scale. It is a violation of our human rights, or as many of us here and many around the world would say, are God-given rights. Seeing these convoys come together tonight is yet again another emotional moment. Another one that I had today was a gentleman came up to me and he told me he believed in this so much that he quit his job and sold off his 401k to be a part of this.
Investing in this country. Good.
Many of you that were here this morning saw the
Lost her
word
audio.
was to continue to press on. I had struggled this morning personally on a lot of that, trying to determine what is best. We have children in this convoy. We have people that are just law-abiding citizens that care about their country and their freedoms. We have innocent people in this convoy, and I don't want to ever see what happened in Canada happen here. So I felt very strongly with many of the other organizers and the organizations, we all felt very strongly that diplomacy was probably the best way for now. Doesn't mean we're going to bend the knee. We only bend the knee to one person. But that we would be willing to have dialogue with our lawmakers. And thanks to the successfulness of these convoys, both yesterday, and by the way, today was one bad mamma jamma of a convoy. But due to those convoys stretching out along around the Beltway, showing just how many we are,
Senator Cruz.
and we're even bigger for tomorrow's convoy. But because of that, we now have meetings with legislators.
Senator Cruz and
tomorrow,
Ron Johnson.
10 of us, made up of drivers, both of RV, four-wheeler, and truckers and organizers, as well as 2 of the doctors, are having our first meeting tomorrow. That meeting is in Ron Johnson's office, and Ted Cruz is joining in. They sent out a message letting the media know that this meeting was taking place. So my hope is that finally, the national media will say, oh, I guess something's going on. Just yesterday, they were saying that we were breaking apart and fraying and people were going home. I don't know about you, but I just watched a ton of people come on in.
True, I did see a number of mainstream media articles point to that.
No matter where you came from, no matter when you got here, no matter when you leave here, everybody that's here right now at this moment is family. Everyone that is here right now is now part of this community. And those that have been here for a while will definitely welcome those that just showed up into our family. Welcome to it, because it's unreal.
Gonna get bigger.
What I want to say here is that I don't know if these meetings are going to be successful. I don't know if our voice is truly going to be heard on Capitol Hill. But what I do know is that all across this country, people know this convoy is happening, and people that have never stood up before are starting to stand up. And if there's at least one win out of this whole thing, it's that we woke America up. It's that we're waking the world up. It's that we are reminding our government that they work for us. I love you all. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. right here, Mr. Marcus Summers, one of the other co-organizers, will be hosting the meeting in the morning, whether he likes it or not. Some of us will be shuffled away down to D.C., hopefully to return. And we will be going down the meetings. We will have our meetings tomorrow, and we are working on live streaming them. We want to make sure that everyone's a part of these meetings, that no one's left out, because this is the people. And they need to hear all of our voices, not just a few of us. They're going to show some things on here on the projector, I believe. I don't really know. I think they're going to show some videos, right? What is it? Some videos that were made of previous convoys is going to be playing over here on this. That kind of sucks. It's like right in those people's eyes.
We need a bigger trailer.
You're all blue. Anyways, I'm getting out of here for now. I'll see you all tomorrow. I'll be hanging out for a little while. Thank you. Tomorrow's convoy, by the way. Let's talk real quick while he sets that thing up and you all got blue light in your eyes. First off, today was an extreme success. Law enforcement was very impressed, loved how it handled, and I've heard nothing but great compliments for the way that this convoy was conducted. And even though it might have been a hassle reshuffling the parking, it is anywhere near as successful in this without the folks running those pilot cars. So to all our folks out there that are escorting us along the way with the pilot cars, thank you. Thank you so very much. Let's give them a round of applause. Tomorrow will be the exact same thing, but the best part is this time, some of us are going to be sitting in D.C. so that they know that we got you right out on the Beltway doing a lap. We ain't playing games.
Right.
We are peaceful. We will remain that way, won't we? But we're going to make sure our voices are heard. Good night, everybody. I don't know how soon this will all start, but I love you all. God bless America. And by the time you all get back tomorrow, I'll be back with an update from that meeting. And as soon as we can push out the live stream, we will. Love you all. Good night. 8 a.m. Tomorrow morning meeting, 8 a.m. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. meeting.
So what do you think, Brendan?
I'm definitely impressed with the size of the crowd and the amount of trucks that are kind of in this kind of little visual that we're getting on the situation down in D.C.
Awesome. Also, there's a gentleman up here, Jeremy.
He has mentioned the amount of commitment that they have where individuals are selling off their 401k, and like that's a lot of commitment entirely. Huge. What's going to happen here? I don't know what's going to happen. Like I have less of a gauge on how this is going to go than I feel like I did on the Canadian convoy. Like yeah, I'm grasping like what's going to happen. It's kind of exciting actually.
Well, it's good to see they got a meeting with Johnson and Cruz. I did receive word on that earlier today from one of our contacts there, but we wanted to wait and get confirmation on that before actually reporting it, because I wasn't 100% sure that we had, accurate information. So I don't like to go with things until we know 100%, but now we know it's confirmed, and I think that is a very encouraging thing for the truckers. And maybe driving around the Beltway is all the leverage they're going to need, after all.
Well, it's a similarity with the Canadian one where you have conservative, or in this case Republican individuals are going to go and talk with them, maybe to have a photo op with them. But is it going to be lukewarm, or are they going to jump on the bandwagon? Remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still wondering if they have enough leverage to actually affect change. And Cruz and Johnson are just two politicians. There's still a big uphill battle to be fought in order to get what they want, which is the elimination of the COVID mandates. But we will see. They've made some progress. This is only really the second day of the laps that they're doing around the Beltway, and as you saw, they had reinforcements show up tonight. Another convoy arriving, so they have the numbers, and they seem very determined to find a way to make sure their voices are heard. So we will find out. We will find out.
So
we will find out.
It's very interesting to note how they stated the media is kind of trying to sabotage them. So I just shared an article from the Washington Post there for you. I did stumble across this today. The headline of it.
Yeah.
And not only that, we had some false information spread by the National Post last week, where they had indicated a California convoy had went home only after recruiting so many people, but it didn't point out the fact that a large convoy had already left. So there's lots of misinformation kind of being spewed out by people. And the Washington Post is pretty left-leaning, I would say, based on my assessment of their news that I've read in the past.
Well, this is a war as well. And a big part of that is the information war that is waged around that, right? We have seen repeated attempts made by the mainstream media, especially some of the left-wing media, to discredit the convoy, undermine it, and convince people that it was ending, over, not working. They were losing support, all of those things. So it is interesting to see the way this thing is unfolded. I can say this convoy has a different feel to it than the one that happened in Canada. The one in Canada had incredible energy behind it. This one, I don't know, it seems more methodical. Maybe it's because it's been planned better than the one in Canada. The one in Canada seemed like it just sort of erupted organically, and the truckers were all just joining in and driving, and they were trying to organize it on the fly. This one feels just more organized, and maybe that's why it will end up being even more successful than the convoy in Canada. And I think maybe they've learned from the mistakes made in Canada, and they know that the real key to the successes that the Canadian Truckers Freedom Convoy had were pinned on the fact that it was entirely peaceful. That's why they were able to maintain the support of the Canadian people. And it's only the misinformation, propaganda, and I hate using that word misinformation because it's used so much, but really these outright lies and fabrications that we have proven to people that that's what they were from the media, the way that they have portrayed the Canadian truckers as terrorists, which is a complete mischaracterization. Entirely false. Entirely. But, they now have a meeting. That's more than they got in Ottawa, in a way. Well, it's one thing that they didn't get in Ottawa. The truckers, the freedom protest in Ottawa, and the other ones, the blockades too, I think they did achieve, a number of things. I think that those have been responsible for the mandates being rolled back in many places across Canada. And we're seeing the easing of restrictions because I think they did show the politicians, even though they may not want to acknowledge it, they've shown the politicians that there's huge support for for the positions that the truckers were taking.
Well, with the exception of Scott Moe, who did say some kind of Scott Moe, the premier of Saskatchewan, by the way, sorry, he did mention in his release, like, oh, thank you for the truckers and this, that, and the other thing. So he did kind of hint towards it, but all the other provinces were like, oh, we're dropping the mandate for this, that, and the other thing, which they're all still there. They may have said, oh, we're not masking right now, or in Ontario, we don't need a vaccine passport to eat in a restaurant. Those things could still be brought up at a whim.
Yeah.
They haven't gone away, necessarily. In Saskatchewan, I think, for the most part, is dead. But for most of the other provinces, all these things could be brought back and will be brought back whenever they feel the need for it.
Right. Well, Brendan, it is now on this March 7th, 2022. It is 9:22 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we have now been on the air for 3 hours, 21 minutes, and 16 seconds. So, with that being said, it's probably time to wrap things up for the evening. We had a lot of stuff happen tonight, and we talked about a lot of things. Ukraine, but news conference with Boris Johnson and Justin Trudeau, and now we see with the People's Convoy, they're making progress down there. So we'll be updating all of that tomorrow, and we'll let you know what happens with that meeting with Johnson and Cruz and the truckers.
Well, it's been definitely an excellent evening. I do appreciate everybody who has tuned in to watch tonight. We absolutely would love it if you are able to support us at freedomreporters.com. There's a hot link below the video in the description, and same as well for anybody viewing on Facebook. Your support is really appreciated. It is going to help us to expand, bring more to the table, and do more. Also, that we could continue to bring the fight to the information war. We also need to remind you, whenever you donate to our channel, communist cries, including Justin Trudeau's, and that hit the like button and the subscribe button and the bell for notifications. My name is Brendan Kennedy, the co-host for Maverick News. It's been a pleasure being here. Have a great night, everybody.
And I'm Rick Walker, also with Maverick News. And we will be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with more of the Freedom Reporters here on the Maverick News channel, where you will find the antivirus programs for your mind. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Catch you all on the flip side.